Welcome to GenXAdulting, and today we have Kendall with us as our special guest. And our first question is always, what year were you born?
1971.
Okay.
Specifically tomorrow.
Oh,
If this were a lifetime.
And if this drops when we're hoping it drops, it will drop on your birthday.
No, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's our goal. So we'll see if Brian can work his magical editing skills.
Yeah.
So you are Gen X.
Hardcore Gen X.
Yes. Right in there. Right in there.
In the thick of it.
In the thick of it. Where were you born?
I was born in Oregon City, Oregon.
Okay. And how long did you live there? Did you grow up there your whole life?
I was there until I was 10. And then my family moved to a little town literally in the middle of Alaska. Literally, if you looked at a map and pointed your finger, you'd practically hit it, called Delta Junction, Alaska.
Okay. So why Oregon City?
My family, my dad's family, started farming there. My great grandfather, grandfather and my grandmother's actually family settled there, homesteading and then farming.
So they were part of the Wild West, coming over for the Wild West?
Yeah, my great grandfather was born in 1987.
1887?
Or I mean 1887.
Yeah.
My grandmother was 1914. My grandmother's family was from Wales.
Okay.
And came over. My grandfather's family was from Germany originally. I don't really know anything beyond like they ended up there. I don't know how.
Okay.
That's been lost in some of the pieces of it. My grandparents obviously there was quite a bit of a difference. My grandma was 18 when they got married. My grandfather farmed. They had, I think, 70 some odd acres in Beavercreek. And my grandfather also worked for the county. There's a road in Beavercreek named after my maiden name.
Really?
Mm-hmm, out there.
Because your grandfather was like a mayor or something?
No, because he worked with the county, got to name the road. And it's like a main thoroughfare from, the Beavercreek store up the hill to Spangler kind of thing.
No way. Yeah. That is so cool. Yeah. So they settled in Oregon City.
Which is really...
Beavercreek specifically.
Okay.
Beavercreek. All right. So for listeners, Oregon City is part of Portland Metro, right?
Correct.
How far from, say, downtown Portland would it be?
I don't track anything in mileage anymore,
which
is different than how I grew up too, back in the day. So, but that's dependent on traffic. And it could be, I used to work downtown and it would take me an hour and a half some days. So
like 2 a.m. on a Saturday, it's probably 20 miles or 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did they farm?
Hay, mainly hay. But they also had sheep. We had sheep, or they had sheep, cows. We had beef cattle. For the longest time growing up, I didn't realize that hamburger and other steaks came in anything other than a white butcher paper.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Until we moved to Alaska, and I'm like, why is this in plastic? Privilege at the time, but
probably
with sustenance too. I mean, we took care of ourselves.
Yeah, and probably such high quality beef and tasted amazing, and that's all you knew. And then
it's like people who have raised their own vegetables and stuff, which we did not do, or at least my family didn't. It's a whole different ball game
experience. So that was your dad then. He was a farm. He grew up on a farm. Yeah. Grew up working a farm. And was a farmer.
He was one of 9.
And he was one of 9.
He was one of 9. Yeah. My grandma had 8 births because my dad was a twin.
Okay.
And there was 4 boys and 5 girls, and the boys worked the farm and the girls didn't, but I don't know that it was my grandfather was a very stoic Archie Bunker type, but not as verbal, I guess. I mean, and I was 4 when he passed away. And so I just remember like my grandmother kind of helped raise me until I was 10. And when I say raise me, she just cared for me. My mom worked. My mom was an educator and she went to school and to get her graduate degree and everything. And my dad was gone all the time working, selling machinery. He did a lot of things. And, but all working for himself, mostly selling tractors, building pole barns, very hands-on,
cool.
Agriculture background,
very much, we didn't drive anywhere on I-5. You took the back roads. You took 99 to get to Salem kind of thing.
Right.
That's wild.
Yeah. Right. but so my grandmother was a very, very, very important person in my life. And so I was with her from basically, my mom says that when my dad asked my mom to marry her, my mom dropped out of college. She was at U of O, and she came up to Oregon City, and they asked permission of my grandmother, and my grandma, which is my dad's dad, said, okay, you guys can get married, which I don't know that they really needed permission, but I think it was a respect thing probably. Yeah. And my dad was very much a mama's boy. And so my grandma said, yes, as long as you finish school, because my mom, of all of my grandmothers, even though it's my dad's family, they didn't go on to, one aunt continued her education out of all of those women. Initially, another aunt did more. I mean, they all did fine. Later on, they were business people and whatnot, but it just wasn't that time and space. I think in the 60s, it wasn't a foregone conclusion.
No, not at all.
To go, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you know.
So then your mom. So was she saying for your mom to finish college?
Yes. Which grandmother was saying that?
My dad's mom.
Oh, okay. So your dad's mom.
Yeah, my paternal
did not want
my mom to lose out on her education because she was literally almost done. She needed maybe a year left. So when she moved up, she started at Portland State, and then they got pregnant with me pretty much right after they got married in 69 and into 70. And she went to Portland State and then did some class. Like when she was pregnant with me, she was going to college. And my grandma basically took care of me from, other than my mom and dad, when my mom got home. But so my grandma was my person.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, which hurts my mom's feelings sometimes to this day.
Right, right.
But she was my person.
I think there's many instances where the grandmother is the child's person for different reasons. So your dad is a farmer, basically, or works in the agriculture industry in some way, space.
Yeah.
Your mom is a teacher, educator. You guys are in Beavercreek. And did you have siblings?
I have a younger brother. He was born in 74. So he's also Gen X.
He is.
Just turned 50, which I don't see him as 50. I see him as 17.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we lived there. Eventually, so we lived in different locations within Oregon or within Beavercreek. And then the last couple years we were there before we ended up moving to Alaska, we actually bought about, I think it was 25 acres of the farm. And then my dad, contractors, but built us our house. And
wow.
Yeah. So we had it was an awesome house and a huge pole barn. And then we had Christmas trees. So we had a full Christmas tree farm. And
wow, that is so cool. So you spent part of your formative years growing up on a Christmas tree farm.
Yeah. And I didn't have to work it. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was awesome.
But do you remember people was it a cut? Cut it yourself?
No.
Okay.
No, it was full on. Yeah. And that was a big thing out in Beavercreek. Still is, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And so they were all enmeshed in that with the people. And so that was right at the end of that. They started doing the thing where they'd come in and haul with helicopters. So, they'd cut the trees. The guys would come in, cut the trees, bundle them, and then you pick them up with a helicopter.
Really?
That's a real shock when you're not expecting a helicopter out your back bedroom window. But
yeah. So did they do that for all of the trees? Like, was it like hand selecting which trees?
No, this was because, at this type of Christmas tree farm, you're growing, and I'm talking like I know these things. I kind of don't, but you're growing like this field's ready to go and they just cut the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then you move to the next. And so this one's ready next year and this one's ready next year. And that's like when we've had fires and huge, weather things in the last few years, to wipe out a whole crop, but it's really wiping out the babies because, they haven't rooted and all the things. So, yeah.
So then why a helicopter? What were those special trees?
They weren't special. It was just the most cost-effective way to get them up out of the thing in a large bundle and then take them to ship off because all of these trees were shipped off. These weren't trees to hang out in Oregon to go buy at a Christmas tree.
Okay.
They were going to California or something.
California,
or
Hawaii,
Oregon.
Mexico.
Yeah, there you go.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys are running a Christmas tree farm in Beavercreek.
That was like a side hustle.
Okay.
That wasn't a main thing. That was just like it was happening.
Right. Yeah. And so you were an actual farm girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I was.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time riding around with my dad. That was actually, my dad was a man of very, very, very few words, but when, like on a Saturday or something, he had stuff to do. He'd take me, and a lot of times my younger brother, we'd be in the truck with him long before seatbelts and all the things.
Of course,
right?
as all Gen Xers will be able to relate
there
to.
was none of that going on. And we'd go out, and he'd be buying machinery or, delivering something or whatever, and we'd play on the truck or in wherever we were. We'd end up playing. I learned how to pee outside because you figured it out or you weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, and I have really happy memories of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I mean, that was just, those are like nostalgic memories, I guess, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether they were or not, I've turned them into that.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
which we do probably.
Definitely.
But,
so then why Alaska?
I would like to know that question, the answer to that question too. My dad's passed away.
Right.
And, but my mom, and I never asked him that question, but my mom says now it's just always my dad's dream. But it's like, what in 1970 or whatever, 72, 75, whatever, what would have said Alaska, especially at that time? Because that was like, they were just building the pipeline. The Alaska Highway hadn't even been, it wasn't fully paved when we moved up and the whole thing. So I don't really know if it was just the sense of wide open spaces. I don't know if it was something that after Vietnam, he wanted to get the heck out of Dodge. I don't know. I really don't. But he had, through the whole farming community, he actually knew a very large family, kind of Salem, Woodburn, Silverton based area that had a lot of property up there to farm. And then he actually, I don't know how he sold machinery up there initially when we, for a big international dealer franchise, I guess. And so he kind of had a hookup. And then my mom was able to get a job up there. And at that time in Alaska, you can make bank.
You can make
teaching.
money.
Yeah.
Because, and it was, so she was making, I don't know exact numbers, but I'm assuming she was making significantly more than she was working at Redland School District.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right. So what the schools you went to down in Beavercreek?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how big those schools were, but when you moved to Alaska, was it similar as far as population?
Oh God, no. I don't know what the Beavercreek School District. So the school that I went to, which was Beavercreek Elementary, because we left, I was in 4th grade. And I was so annoyed because by moving, I wasn't going to get to go to outdoor school. Do you remember that was such a big deal?
Every Oregonian knows outdoor school. Outdoor school is fun. I think it was a week, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We would get on buses and we would have to bring our we were in cabins, but you still had to bring a sleeping bag and all that. And it was educational. It was educational. It's kind of like Friday the 13th type cabin vibe.
Yeah.
But not scary.
And what age?
5th grade or 6th grade?
6th grade, I think.
6th grade.
6th grade. So I was still a year away from it, but I was just.
You were almost there.
I was almost there. I mean, that's what you worked for.
Outdoor school.
Yeah.
Outdoor school was, and every day you did something nature related and learned about things. And
we had something like that.
Yeah, because we were in Oregon.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, everything was there. So, oh my gosh, you didn't get to go to outdoor school?
I didn't get to go to outdoor school. My kids did, so they got to live it for me.
That's good.
I wasn't a week, though. They only got to go for like 3 days.
Oh,
now you can learn how to grow weed instead of the normal thing.
I don't need to grow it. It's legal. If somebody else has grown it, and you can just go walk into a dispensary for it.
Yes, it's very easy now.
Like, there's no need to like mess with your own. It's a lot better if you probably don't.
Definitely. So was there a culture shock though when you started school in Alaska?
The school was not the culture shock.
Right.
So, I mean, okay, so backing up a little bit. So you have to imagine, we were very comfortable in Oregon City. I had very much or in Beavercreek, I had very much that life where, you went to school. Obviously I went home after school to grandma, then went home. Mom made dinner, even though she was working full time. My dad would either be there or be there later because he's out doing whatever. And then every Sunday you went to church, went to Sunday school, and then you went home, and then you went to grandma's and had, lunch, brunch kind of thing. And she'd make fried chicken or whatever. And then all the other aunts and uncles, not all of them every time, but would be out there. All the cousins would be out there. I mean, I think I've got 35 immediate cousins, but my dad was kind of on the lower end. So I've got cousins that are retired now. I mean, long retired, that are in their almost 70s.
That makes sense because he's one of 9.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly. My oldest aunt, I think, is almost 90. I mean, I always have to like pull up the birth dates and do the math. But
yeah.
Anyway, so they got taken from that.
Yes.
Which was traumatic. And
taken is a key word.
Oh, I fully would have sold. I was taken.
Yeah.
Right.
100% taken. My brother was about 6, almost 7, I guess. And we went up there. We drove up in a 1/2-ton pickup, the 4 of us. Not a dual or like back seat. All 4 of us in the front seat.
Oh my goodness.
Whatever we didn't put on a shipping container to get up there, which that's how all of our other stuff got, was in the back of the truck. And we drove from here to Alaska through on that the Alaska highway, went through customs and all that was the whole thing.
How far of a drive was that?
It's 2,500 miles.
Okay.
And I don't know how long it took us that time. I've got some really interesting pictures of myself, but I just remember, you had this cassette thing and like there's certain songs, so old country songs that I hear that I'm just like, oh, I'm back in the truck.
It brings you right back there.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. It makes me think of my dad. And then when we first got there, wherever we were going to move, which was above this machine shop where my dad was selling machinery, wasn't ready for us. So we moved into this like single wide trailer out on this other property that was like off of a gravel pit. And we were there in August, early August, because we started school there in like mid-August or whatever. And it snowed.
Oh my gosh.
And there was no heat, and that was rare. It doesn't normally snow in August, but whatever happened, there was no heat in this trailer. Like we're literally all, 4 of us are like on the mattress on the floor with sleeping bags. I remember my parents put us in the truck and drove us to Fairbanks, which was 2 hours away in the nearest city.
Right.
Just so we kind of stay warm.
Yeah.
And it's like, and we were just like, what?
So you guys
happening?
You were pulled out of the most comfortable, wholesome Norman Rockwell life.
Right. In my mind. Yeah.
Christmas tree farm, Hallmark, all of it.
It sounds like a Hallmark movie.
It does.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Warm and cozy.
Yeah.
Life is idyllic.
At 10, that's what it felt like.
Of course.
Sure it wasn't. But...
Yeah. I'm talking about your perspective at that age to it's snowing in mid-August and we're freezing.
Yeah. And it doesn't look like anything I'm familiar with, right? Because there's not a single Douglas fir to be seen. There are all these scrawny, weird looking trees.
Really?
Birch trees, which I love now. That's like one of my favorite trees.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because it's too cold. They can't like really get going, right? You don't think about that, but they just, you should see what people think up there as a Christmas tree if you go cut your own. It's ridiculous.
Wow. I would have thought it was similar to Oregon and Washington forests.
No, they're these really, I'll show you pictures sometimes.
Yeah.
But,
well, there are parts of Alaska that have forests and stuff. Right?
Oh, there's forests. It's just very different than the forests I was used to, right? Yeah. And, you know, being in Oregon, we've got the huge, I mean, not that we had the redwoods, but you know what I mean? And we went to school in an area where that was like that anyways. Yeah. So, so the school part was obviously I was the new kid and,
how big were the classes? Like, was the class size significantly smaller than in Beavercreek?
No, actually the elementary portion of it felt kind of typical, but like the size of the elementary school I went to in Beavercreek was probably similar to the size that I went to up there, but my elementary school was also the high school.
Okay.
So they were like attached. The elementary was kind of this end. There was the little gym where we also did which was the cafeteria too. And then this side was like the high school and the big gym, which was like the actual sport gym, right? Stuff like that. So
was there a middle school?
The middle school was on the military base. So Delta Junction was adjacent to Fort Greely at the time, which is decommissioned now, but they do missile stuff, things up there now. I don't know what they do, but and that's where the middle school, and there was another elementary school out there for the kids that did live on post. And so I went to middle school there.
Okay.
So, and then the high schoolers came in. So they were they came in to be bussed in for the high school. We got bussed out for middle school. But
so the
junior high when I was a kid.
Same. So the military kids, you went to school with the military kids
at high school, junior high and high school,
but not elementary school.
Not elementary, no.
Did you go to Oh, sorry.
Did they have their own elementary school on the base?
They had their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you go to school with like Native Alaskans?
There was a few in our town.
Yeah.
Not many. Not many at all in that area. I mean, I had experience in Fairbanks. There was a lot of Native folks in Fairbanks, and then through sports, we went to towns where they were predominantly Native, and specifically Barrow, which is called something else now that I can't pronounce, and I'm sorry for that. But which was all Native pretty much.
Yeah, yeah.
And you had to fly in to play and stuff.
Yeah.
So what would you say your biggest culture shock was that you can remember at that time?
It was, for me, the culture shock was just the environment itself, and it was just nothing like I'd lived my life, and you don't expect that, right? And then for me, it was my family. It was my grandma. Yeah. It was not having that touchstone, and everything that I'd known up until that point was different in the sense that I rode the bus to school, which I rode the bus to and from school at my grandma's, but I came home to my grandma. Here, this is very Gen X of me. So I would have been 10, turning 11 that year in the 5th grade. If we didn't stay after school with my mom worked in the same elementary school. She was a kindergarten teacher. And either we stayed with her, but she worked long. She was a teacher that went to school way early and stayed way late. She didn't check in, check out, right as the bell's ringing kind of thing. And so if we went home, there was nobody home. Or we went home in the first year we were home. My dad was technically there, or there were people there, but not in our apartment above this machine shop. It was just so, you fended for yourself. You got the snack and watched whatever was on TV afterwards or whatever. I don't remember having homework. That first year, I remember, and my mom, I don't think really wanted to do this, and she did it for my dad. And so she was miserable. I think my dad was fine. I think he had his things, right? And my mom became fine with school and creating her space there and did quite well that way. Ultimately she became a principal. But yeah, that first year was rough and like that. But I will tell you, so they tried to get us out at Christmas time to come down for Christmas, because that's a big deal, especially like I was in the church thing. I was in the church play every year. I was Mary the last year. I mean, this, like, all these like status things when you're little.
They took you.
They took me.
They took you away from all of it.
Took me. It's funny. I've never really thought of it like that, but it did feel like that. So they tried to get us out at Christmas, which I can't even imagine what those tickets would have cost back in that time. And there were very few flights in and out of Fairbanks, and so they couldn't because they were booked. And so they actually flew us out for Thanksgiving, which would have been a long weekend, right? My mom couldn't take time off from school. She barely started.
Right.
So it means we like flew out probably Wednesday night at midnight on the midnight flight, and we're back by Sunday. So that Christmas at home, I can picture it, and I've seen pictures, of course, so it helps stamp that. It was like a divorced family's Christmas where like the kids get so much stuff.
Right.
And we joke about it now because it's like the trees in the corner, which was kind of dead because we had to buy a live one and they don't really live well up there. And like there's toys and like I got a doll. I mean, all this stuff just out. I mean, it was hysterical.
Right. To make up for the fact that you couldn't be down in Beavercreek.
It was very much a makeup situation.
Well, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when I picture Alaska, I've never been there. And so when I picture Alaska, I picture cold.
In the winter, yeah.
And I picture it's always light.
In the summer.
Okay.
So in the cold, it's dark.
Okay.
And in the summer, it's light and warm.
So when would the winter descend on average?
I mean, pretty much September it starts. Right. Well, Alaska, I mean, we do that. They do this now a little bit more in the news that I've noticed where they say like, oh, you're gaining 2 minutes of light or you're losing 2 minutes of light. In Alaska, that is like a predominant part of the newscast, or it was back then. I mean, I haven't lived there for a long, long time. So this was also the 80s or 82 when we were up there. And so, yeah, I mean, basically you're gaining daylight until you start to lose it. And that's like September. And then it just gets more and more significant. And by the time you hit solstice and that kind of thing, I mean, technically I mean, there's pictures of it, but the sun does this. It doesn't do this, right?
Right, right.
And so it feels like your day's always dusk
Okay.
until it's dark.
Well, you know where the sun is, right? It's down here.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what's interesting, the darkness didn't bother me as a kid or a teenager that I recall. The cold did, because where we lived in the interior, it was very cold. I mean, it was, it's not as normal now, or maybe as often, I don't know, but our winters were 20 below zero. That was standard,
Jeez.
sometime in that way. And it was really super dry where we lived. And so you had snow and it would drift and blow off the road. So like we didn't have chains or, they had snow tires, I'm sure, but it would ice up if you had a little warm snap or whatever. But we went outside recess until 20 below.
Wow.
Yeah. We didn't get out of school until it was 60 below zero. And that was only because they wouldn't run the buses, because the ice fog from the exhaust would create really bad, really bad issues with the roads. You wouldn't be able to see. In fact, there have been some kind of nasty accidents because of that.
It's 5 degrees in Fairbanks right now.
Yeah.
I just looked it up.
That is crazy. So
it's cold.
It's cold. And it's like that for, from October until breakup, which is, usually April-ish, give or take. Like usually by the time we had prom, it was clear, and that would have been in April probably. So breakup would have happened, which is what we call when all the snow goes away finally.
That's what it's called.
Yeah.
So is seasonal depression a big thing up there?
I'm sure it is. We didn't have those terms.
Right. Of course not. Right. And I mean, I think it is where we're from in Oregon too, and we didn't have those terms, because I didn't realize I grew up in gray. I had no idea. I had no idea I was growing up in gray.
Right.
Honestly, until I moved to Ashland, I think, because in Ashland we got more clear skies.
Totally.
And it could be cold but blue skies. I'd never had that before, really. And so I think in Alaska you probably don't realize you have seasonal depression until you probably leave there.
Well, and that's when the sun is out, right? And even if it's a short window of time, a lot of times it was bright sun. Like you wore sunglasses all winter, right? Because it's reflecting off the snow too. But because it's bright and clear, it's just for a short period of time.
Right. Yeah. So I wonder if the cold is what might cause it. Or like what?
Well,
just
no, the dark. I think the darkness.
It's the dark.
Because the dark comes in quick, right?
Okay.
And you've got very little time.
Yeah. So how long were you there? Were you there through high school?
I went 5th grade and I graduated high school there. So my graduating class was about 50-ish.
Wow.
So my entire high school was about 200 or so, give or take.
Wow.
So did everybody date everybody?
Not everybody, but yes.
But pretty much.
You circled
everybody worked through everybody.
You circled the drain on. Yeah.
Sounds like middle school here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you had your ones that were high school sweethearts all the way through or whatever. But the interesting thing is by being there, I was a big fish in a very little pond, right? And so the cool thing was to be in sports, and I played basketball and I played volleyball, and I was a 4-year varsity letterman in basketball, and got to travel. And it was a real privilege to do that, because back then, or I mean still, your nearest town is 2 hours away, and the nearest town in our league was 3 hours away. So that means you got on the bus on Friday afternoon at some point, sometimes JV, but usually, and then always varsity. You got on the bus, you went to say Glen Allen, because that was the nearest one. You got off the bus, you'd play your games Friday, you'd stay the night at the school, they'd feed you, and then get up Saturday and you'd have a full day of games, and you get on the bus and they'd bring you home.
Wait, you slept at the school?
In the classrooms.
What a trip.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We had a Christmas tournament in Valdez every year, which was so much fun because it was multiple schools in one place.
Yeah.
Valdez was a 5-hour bus ride.
Wow.
And
are we talking school buses or luxury buses?
Honey.
This is Alaska. This is in Boca.
I don't even know if they had luxury buses. Actually, I'm sorry. The luxury buses were the tourist buses that came up all summer.
Okay.
But yeah, it was school buses.
School buses.
School buses.
Was there heat?
Oh, and there was heat, but I mean,
Those seats are hard.
Those seats are hard, and there's a whole hierarchy, and all your stuff's in there and your gear.
What about the parents? They're following in cars?
That far away, very few parents would come.
Oh, and we're Gen X. They didn't come.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll see you Monday.
Yeah. Could you imagine now?
Oh my
There'd
God.
be like a convoy.
We stay in Marriott's and shit.
No, but I wonder if up in Alaska, I'm sure there's similar helicopter parenting that's gone on. And
I'm
I
sure.
bet now there's a little trail of cars behind those buses.
And in some cases they would, right? You'd have a couple that would travel more often than others. Or if it was like going up to Eielson, which is the Air Force Base just before Fairbanks, people would come to that one. Like that wasn't that far, you know?
Yeah.
But they were at every home game, every single
right.
And more people that, it was like, remember the scene in Dazed and Confused where he shows up at the baseball and the old guy's like, hey, how's the arm or whatever. And he's like, that guy doesn't even have a grandkid in school anymore.
Right.
That was what we had. You had folks that that's what they did.
Well, it was an event.
Supported.
It was an event for that town.
Basketball, volleyball, and hockey, of course. But the hockey rinks were all outside. My brother played hockey. It was great, but it sucked to have to be a participant, to watch.
So cold.
Yeah. But yeah, so we got to do so I was traveled to, we had my senior year, we went to regionals in Cordova, which was a 5-hour bus ride to Valdez and a 5-hour ferry ride to Cordova.
Wow.
So all of the schools in our league were there. We play our tournament. We didn't do great, but we played our tournament. Well, there was we almost didn't get to go because we were having this horrific, this memory is like coming to me.
No,
but
this is great.
We had this horrific storm and we almost didn't get to go because it was 60 below zero and they didn't want the buses to go, but it's basketball.
Yeah.
We're going to make this happen. Right. So they do, they get us down there, we play our games, whatever. And then it's, Sunday probably, and we're supposed to be getting back on the ferry to get back and repeat the process. And this storm has come through the south and the ferry, like we went down to the ferry and the ferry's like doing this at the dock. You can't get on the ferry.
Right.
So we were stuck. We had to stay. Meantime, this school has school on Monday. And
right.
So all of these teams are stuck there.
Oh, wow.
So where did you all sleep?
They would shuttle us between we'd sleep in the classrooms and then they'd shuttle us like into the gym, but then they had to feed us. And I remember they would bring us video, this was back when you had the VCR in a cart.
Yes.
Then they'd bring us video, and we could watch movies or whatever. And of course we didn't have our homework or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we were there maybe until Wednesday and they finally were like, okay, we got to fly you home.
Wow.
And so they put us on an airplane, one of the small ones, and they flew us into Fairbanks. And
how many airplanes? Because all those teams, there had to have been a bunch of little airplanes.
I'm sure they had multiples. Because at that time it would have been at least 6, 7, 8 schools. I don't know how many.
Wow.
But yeah, so
sports was your vehicle to travel.
It was, and just to get away from being the
town,
school, the same,
the small town
over and over. I mean, it was the same people over and over, but
yeah. So then, in a small town like that, I assume there's one grocery store.
Yeah.
And like what, a couple restaurants?
Yeah, we had a grocery store, which is not where. So it was interesting. I think because of where we came from, we lived Alaska a little differently than people that maybe had always lived there, right? Or my friends that had been born there and their families that came there. And so like the grocery store for us was where to get milk and you needed lettuce and, kind of those things. And then at least once a month we went to Fairbanks and, you'd come home with $400, which back then would have been a lot. The whole back of the thing would be full. There was no Costco or anything, but it was that kind of situation. Fred Meyer's was basically it.
Yeah.
There was a Fred Meyer's?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Fairbanks. And a Safeway.
Yeah, okay.
And an Albertsons. No, Market Basket, which I think was Albertsons. But we would go up there and on the way home in North Pole, we would make my mom go through the drive-through McDonald's. It was the last fast food. We'd get McDonald's, the big thing. This was more high school, but we'd get McDonald's and you'd have your special McDonald's and then you'd get extra and then you'd take it home and then you'd take that to school the next day. Real cool because you had a Big Mac. It's just
but that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
We did have a Tasty Freeze.
Oh, I forgot about Tasty Freeze.
Yeah.
Did you say North Pole?
Mm-hmm.
So North Pole, Alaska, that's the town or where Santa is?
No. Well,
both.
Santa's there. It's not the literal North Pole, Brian. That is Tim Allen under the thing someplace. No. No, there's a town called North Pole, Alaska. And they actually have a place called, like, if you ever toured there, that's like a big tourist thing, right? They have the Santa Claus house.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could go like have your mail stamped with the North Pole and stuff.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, North Pole. And it's much more, it's like a suburb now of Fairbanks. Right?
Okay.
But it's just a little north of Eielson, which is the Air Force Base, and then just south of Fairbanks.
I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a town called North Pole.
Stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, I know. You were like, wait, what? Santa?
There's Santa?
So you graduate high school with your class of 50. And what decision did you make? Did you stay in Alaska?
No.
Did you go to school in Fairbanks?
No.
Like, what did you do?
So basically, I grew up. So my mom, backtracking a little bit, my mom grew up in Klamath Falls with 3 siblings. And somehow or another, they grew up very poor. Very, my grandfather worked very hard, but, you know, they just didn't have a lot. And somehow all 3 of my aunts ended up going to college and graduating, getting furthering their degrees and that kind of, or their education. And so my mom's expectation was you either go to school or you go to the military. There's nothing else. And so I always grew up going, I'm going to college. I'm going to college. And so when we lived up there every summer, once school ended, my mom would pack my brother and I up in the car and we would drive to Oregon. And we spent the entire summer in Oregon until mom needed to go back to school. And so later on, like, we did a school tour and we went to U of O because that's where my mom went. So sure, I'd want to go there. Scared the crap out of me because it was huge. I mean, it was, U of O was probably bigger than Fairbanks at the time.
Right.
And I'm like, I go here. Yeah. And my aunt and uncle lived in Central Point. And so that's where we spent most of our summer. So I spent, you know, a lot of time at Emigrant Lake. You know, we had families still in Klamath Falls, you know, camping at, you know, Lake of the Woods, all the things, doing that. So, and we spent a lot of time in Ashland, which is where Southern Oregon University was. It's not SOC anymore.
No, now it's Southern Oregon. When we all went, it was Southern Oregon State College.
So I toured that school and it's like, okay, this makes, and obviously I was already comfortable with the town. Right? But this felt right. Like I could live here. So that's where I went. And I don't even think I applied anywhere else. And I never went and saw Oregon State. I might have made a different decision. Maybe. Who knows?
So you applied to Southern Oregon University.
Yep. And so.
And you got accepted, obviously.
I did really well. I did really well in school without trying. The unfortunate part of that is the education, and I don't know if that's true still, the education in my school at the time was probably not very great. I mean, it was pretty basic.
In Alaska?
In Alaska. Or in my town specifically, right? Yeah. Delta. And so I didn't learn how to, because I didn't have to. I didn't learn how to study. I didn't learn how to do anything more than I needed to do just to pass. But that didn't serve me later.
Do you think that was also because you were the big fish in a small pond and you were athletic and all that? Like you kind of got shuffled along?
It probably. I also think that it wasn't challenging at all. And I don't, and a lot of I just don't think the teachers challenged any more of anyone, right? But I mean, there were kids in my school that were like super smart and and did well, right? So there was also something probably in me, like it's not just their fault.
Yeah. Right. It was like the combo.
Try either.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I didn't have to, so why would I, right?
Well, did you find Southern Oregon University challenging?
I found school challenging, not because I wasn't smart enough to be there. I didn't know how to do school. I didn't know how to, because my life before that was like, okay, great, I've got a paper to write. So I wrote it the day before. Well, that only goes so far in college.
Right. Yeah.
Even in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to, you know, looking back now, I have all this different language and these different viewpoints. I think I had a lot of anxiety too, and feeling like a country bumpkin from, you know, whatever in this environment. And so I was real into the social piece because I could excel with that. And I think, you know, kids that grew up, I was the kid with the report card that always said, well, she's fantastic. We love her. She talks too much. She has to, you know what I mean? I think I probably had some undiagnosed girl version of ADHD. I still do, but I didn't know how to manage that appropriately in school. So I became very social, more social, and spent way too much time focused on that and lost myself in the process. And I think there was different ages and stages of that in that freshman year, especially, but yeah, so I didn't do well at school.
And did you ever talk to your parents or your mom about that?
No, we didn't. I didn't have a really authentic relationship with my mom. I didn't have a really authentic relationship with my mom until probably the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
Because I grew up very much, so I was on my mom's side specifically, I was the first child, the first grandchild. My mom's a people pleaser. And there was an expectation placed on me to be that. And I got validation from that. So I learned it was like a dopamine hit, right? Like, oh, look at how Kendall, she's so good at church, or, oh, she's this or she's that. And I didn't know how to manage that with her to like disappoint her. If it didn't go with what she thought things should be, it was disappointing.
Right.
And so, and that was actually, once it got to the point where, you couldn't get spanked or whatever anymore. And not that I got spanked a lot, but, as you get older, you get grounded and all that. But it was like, I'm not really that mad, but I am just so disappointed.
And that's so harsh.
And just saying that like makes my heart go, you know?
It triggers a little something.
It does.
Yeah. So you had this huge fear of disappointing her. And so you kept not knowing you were probably having a little bit of a learning disability challenge, social anxiety. You've come from a Alaska Beavercreek background to Ashland, which at the time was a very hippie, bohemian, artsy community, beautiful town, one of the most magical towns in America, but feeling a little fish out of water. Probably had some imposter syndrome going on there.
Yeah.
And then not being able to talk to your family about it.
Yeah. Well, and back then, if you remember, like you talked maybe once a week, you had a phone card.
Right.
And then you stood at the payphone in the dorms, right?
Yep.
And, you did your 20 minutes or whatever. And it was like, you're not going to get into it that way.
No.
You're really not.
Yeah.
And actually, when I left Alaska, my mom and I were barely speaking. That last summer before I came to school, my mom still came down here with my brother, and I lived up there and worked at the Big Top Diner.
Yeah.
Actually, I was a car hop.
Oh.
Which was amazing. I made so much money.
Like on roller skates?
Not on roller skates.
Yeah. Okay. But you would go up to the car
with the tray.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
It was so much fun. My best friend in high school, her uncle and aunt owned it. And so it was just like, the cool thing to do.
That's
too,
cool.
right?
Very cool.
So I did that all summer, but I had a house to myself because my dad was actually gone that summer too, for some reason, working elsewhere instead of in Alaska. And I had a great summer. And that money I made no one told me that the money I was making was supposed to go with me.
Oh, you weren't aware that was to go for college, towards spending money in college.
Money, yeah. And so, so we had a huge blow up.
And that ties back to communication, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And then my brother was in a pretty significant four-wheeling accident right before I left, like days before I left. And had to have surgery and was in a wheelchair for a little bit and stuff. And so she was also in that.
Right.
And I was and she put me on a plane with 2 suitcases. And I went flew to Medford. My aunt and uncle picked me up. My aunt Novella picked me up. And she helped me move into my dorm room. I had 2, I think Brian knows from that point because we were in the same dorm. But I was all with my 2 suitcases. We went to Woolworths to get like a new comforter.
Where was there a Woolworths?
In Medford.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
What a trip.
I know, right? And, to get my 2 spoons and 2 forks to have a little something.
Right.
My, whatever. Anyway, so my aunt and uncle helped me.
Okay, so your parents weren't there to set up your room and all that.
And I didn't expect them to be because my mom worked. And that was the priority. She wouldn't have been able to take, I watch this whole event now go on. And even the event I had with my own daughter, taking her to college. And I mean, it was like, a parade.
Oh, it's something. Yeah. It's yeah.
I've seen some stuff on social that's even like, you know, that wasn't my experience even with Amelia, but it's like, oh yeah, it was a whole thing. It was 2 cars. It was like my mom had to count. I mean, it was a whole thing, but so yeah, it was a much different experience, but there was no expectation. I actually don't remember a lot of people having a lot of that noise though there. I mean, you flew in, like, I don't know.
His parents.
We flew in. I had nothing because I flew in from New Jersey. We went to Medford. We went to the mall, the Rogue Valley Mall or something. Yeah. I think we went to like JCPenney's and bought my comforter and sheets and all that stuff. Yeah.
I mean, you brought your suitcase.
I had my dead tapes and pretty much some hacky sacks. I think.
The dead tapes that are hanging above your head right now. I think.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're in the dorms. You're focusing a little more on social life.
Yeah.
And how'd that freshman year go?
I mean, it excuse me, it went okay. I didn't get great. I didn't fail out. I wasn't like on academic suspension or anything, but it wasn't super successful. And but I developed really great friendships at the time. I mean, it's interesting though, I haven't kept very many of them, but it was, you know, it was the next phase of life. I was just paying for it through student loans.
Right.
It's like, so so that, I mean, school wise, it was just not great. And I also thought I was going to be a teacher like my mom. And what I realized, I think, which I wasn't mature enough to understand or voice, was that wasn't what I wanted to do. Right. Like it was just kind of almost an expectation, but not that she told me that, but just that, well, yeah, that's what you do. That's what girls do.
Right.
Which is funny because not that I would have imagined I'm doing the line of work I'm doing now, but it's more office related, that type of thing. I used to play office as a kid.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Like I had, you know, I would get like, back when we had carbon copy things, you know, like receiving, you know, I had like a pretend phone, and I was like, you know, back then I was playing secretary.
Right.
Because, you know, you didn't think in the 70s, like who knew that you could run your own business or whatever, but.
And be in charge.
Yeah. But, although I did have that example, my aunt was that way, but, anyway, so yeah, so I should have just changed my major.
Right.
And maybe I would have been interested in school too.
Right. Because you were, what was the major geared towards education at the time?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it was freshman year, so it was a lot of English and all that, which was fine. I excelled at it. But I also didn't know to ask for help. So like go to my advisor and have a conversation, or like I went through a couple different periods where now I can look back and I know I was greatly depressed because I literally didn't leave my room for 2 weeks. Other than to go to butt food.
Yeah.
Which was
that's where you got food.
That's what we used to call it. It was the cafeteria. I know.
Yeah.
We had a fun dorm though. That's part of a challenge.
Our
whole dorm partied.
They did.
You guys had a fun dorm. I was in the one down the hill that was more prim and proper.
Which is really funny because I wanted to be in those because they were the newer dorms.
They were.
I mean, the dorms we were in were like the ones from a million year, and they're still there.
Yeah, I don't even think they had air conditioning. I don't even think they still do. I don't know if you need it per se in Oregon, unless you're there in the summer.
In the summer you do, yeah. But no, our dorms, I have to tell it, they were nice, guys.
Yeah, they were nice.
They were nice.
They were very nice.
And I made sure I got in those.
Yeah.
But we did have butt food a lobby away.
You did, but I think I'm glad it wasn't right around the corner. No, like I had to walk up that hill to get food, so that was good.
Because they didn't even have food back then.
We didn't. No, butt food was our food. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody was like, we're not walking up there.
They have more dorms down that way now too.
Oh my goodness.
They built they're beautiful. Yeah.
I'm sure.
But those old ones are still there.
That's amazing. But yeah, no, we even knew. And I didn't really know you guys at all freshman year, but we knew of your dorm and knew that you guys, it was fun there.
Oh yeah, we partied.
Yeah.
We had a good time. We must have had really cool RAs because,
we did.
I mean,
Dan and then some other dude, I can't remember.
Yeah,
he had a mustache.
It was 2 guys, right?
Two dudes,
Yeah.
Well, that's why, because the guys don't care. It's the girl RAs that are like really on it. But okay, so then where did you go for that summer? Did you stay in Ashland?
No, so I excuse me, so spring term I was in a class, met a boy, But I went back. So my parents, of course, came back to Alaska. They were in Oregon City. They were at my grandmother's house. So I went back there because I didn't have a job. I wasn't working.
To Oregon City?
To Oregon City. Well, Beavercreek, actually.
Were they living in Beavercreek now? Okay.
No, they were just there for the summer. My mom was there for the summer. So that's where I went. And I got a job at JCPenney selling the fake jewelry, right? And wearing pantyhose.
Oh, yes.
Which by that point, I had transitioned pretty significantly into Ashland.
Yes.
And I was full on Birkenstocks, no makeup, all the things. And I'm working at JCPenney's, putting on pantyhose.
Yeah.
But I needed a job. So it was either that or working at the at a restaurant that didn't make sense. So anyways, but because of this boyfriend who stayed there, I would basically, not every weekend, but I would, Thursday night, Friday night, whatever, get in my car from work at 9:00 and drive to Ashland. And then I'd stay the weekend there, and then I'd drive home. And so.
And that, if I remember correctly, I think I had that down to 4.5 hours.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes
somewhere around there.
You could do it a little better. And I knew where every couple liked to sit. There was a couple rest areas where they'd hang out right before. In fact, when I drive that, very rarely now, but I still okay, we got to watch it because that's where, and because I got a couple tickets on that because I had what did I drive then? Oh, I had a little Ford Escort.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it was great. It was like a little car. It said "Got Milk" on the license plate thing. But
that's such a generational thing.
My dad traded a tractor for it.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Farm girl in her Ford Escort. Exactly. So you're
smoking away,
smoking your cigarettes. So and she's got milk. Yes. So you're working at Penny's during the week, going down to Ashland on the weekends, and then did you continue school though for sophomore year? Like you picked classes and
so if I recall correctly, I think I made it a full 1 or 2. I honestly don't remember if I made it a full 2 terms after. So I know I made it fall because we were on trimesters, right? So I think I made it fall term.
Now, is this when we moved in together?
Yeah, that would have been.
So we found our apartment.
Yeah.
We met because I was dating a guy who was friends with your boyfriend.
And I think became roommates.
And they became roommates. Yeah. And we needed a ride from Portland to Ashland. And was it the guy I was dating, or Mike?
No, the guy you were dating.
Had the truck that has back then they had a cover. Canopy cover. And we laid in the back because you couldn't sit up.
We couldn't sit up.
I think about that now.
I know.
If you made me lay in the back of a covered truck for 4.5 hours, I would lose my mind. I wouldn't have done it.
But we talked the entire way. We had never met each other. Yeah. We literally, Mike and I show up at the parking lot at the shopping center, little Oregon City shopping center, and get in the, I don't remember how we got there, honestly.
I think my mom probably dropped me off.
Yeah. And ironically, your mom was living in Oregon City at that time.
Weirdly.
So that was a weird thing. But anyways, we talked, and literally, I don't know if we really decided that at that moment, but I think it was okay, cool. You want a roommate? Yeah. Let's room.
Yeah. It was one of those moments in life where for a fact, this friend is going to be your friend. This is going to be a best friend. It was this is a person. This is going to be one of my people. And so from the start of leaving Portland till we got to Ashland, by the time we got to Ashland, I knew, okay, this is going to be one of my best friends. Yeah. And then, we decided to live together. And that was a fun year. We had an apartment and we had a crappy couch that we paid for, which I don't know why, because we got it from these guys and they had thrown up on it.
Yeah. And from across the street in that house, right?
Where did you guys live?
How do you describe it? It's past Big Al's, right?
Yeah, past Big Al's. It was there was a
outside of Ashland.
Yeah, there was a market up there, and then you turned and you started up the hill. So it was
the house you guys got kicked out of?
No, it wasn't that house, but it was that same road. Okay. But it just was at the bottom of it. But it was it was just an apartment complex.
Somebody at some point lived across the street from us, Grant, and remember they had that house. Short dude. Carl.
Lived
they
there,
eventually lived across the street from us, but.
Wait, wasn't Big Al's down by the campus? Are you thinking of the Red Board?
No, well, there was 2 Big Al's at one point, but they closed the one by the campus. There was one on the other end of town.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we lived there and we sat on that couch and talked pretty much that whole year. On that gross, disgusting, I would burn it now couch.
It was so, I've sent you that one picture. Yeah. I look at that now and I'm just
I know.
I mean, I'm sure I slept on that couch at points.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think the guys didn't even want to take money, and I think I insisted, and they're like, "You guys are weird."
Yeah.
So okay, so we lived together sophomore year.
Yeah.
You were definitely in school the first semester.
For sure, the first. I might have dropped out maybe in the middle of winter, or just stopped going. Let's be clear.
Right.
But I was working, so I think at that point, I don't think I was working at Big Al's.
But
I was working. But I had a couple jobs.
Did I know you were not going to school though?
I don't know, honestly, because I lived. So the problem, I look back on things now, but I lived I just wouldn't have talked about it. I don't think I would have lied about it to you or whatever, but I just don't think I talked about it.
So everyone's on a need to know basis.
Yeah, and I wasn't my parents didn't know at the time.
No, I remember that because even once I realized, I remember your parents didn't know.
Yeah, and it's a little fuzzy even now, and then that's okay.
Yeah, because I think they thought you were still going to school at least that semester, right? Yeah.
I was. It's so hard for me to realize that I lived a lot of my life lying in a way, not in a way, lying, or lying by omission.
Right.
Because I was so terrified of disappointing them or other people that instead of just being who I was and being like, okay, this is who I am, I didn't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And that ate me up in different ways.
Right.
Right. Because, and it wasn't like I created big elaborate things and it was like I was manufacturing. It was just that by not telling the whole thing or by skirting that, then I didn't have to disappoint anybody.
Did you ever have an event where that kind of led you to that? Or is that just something that evolved and one day you realize that now that you're an adult that I wasn't always honest or forthcoming?
The realization of all that, you mean?
More, I guess, a shitty question, but the question I'm trying to ask is, do you have an idea of why you got to the point where you thought you might be letting down your parents or your mom? Was there something that happened where she's like, oh, Kendall, you shouldn't be doing that?
I mean, that was a culmination of just expectations.
Yeah.
From times before I could even remember, probably. There was just
conditioned stuff.
Conditioned stuff. I think that's a great way to put it. And then, there's comments made in high school or whatever, you're disappointing. And my mom had a real thing about, in our little tiny town, there's a status thing. Like my mom never drank a beer in that town when we go have pizza. My mom loves a beer with pizza.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't do it in that town because you'd get a reputation that, oh, did you see a single beer.
Yeah.
And you had to, she would never go buy a beer because you had to go to the liquor store and to do it there. And, just, she was very conditioned on appearances.
Mm-hmm.
And she conditioned that into me. My brother was exactly the opposite. He didn't give an F and did what he wanted and said,
he's the young guy.
Yeah.
He's the baby.
And I resented the hell out of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Resented the hell out of it because I always felt like I was towing the line or lying about it. And he was just like, and just doing whatever he wanted.
So he rebelled and you were compliant.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And your way of feeling acceptance and love from your mom was by conforming to what you thought she wanted at all times. Mm-hmm. And then probably as you realized you're not that person and that you're learning about yourself, you were too scared to talk to her about who you are.
Yeah. I didn't know how to reconcile the pieces of me. Like, when you go away, so far away from your parents and all that, and you go to such a unique school and, and a unique experience. And like, I had never even heard of the Grateful Dead before I showed up there. And then, slowly, not everyone gets into it. Right. But, I did. And it's, it's a culture along with the music and it's a spiritual thing and all those. And that whole thing was very foreign to me, but I really took to it. And, it was really a part of me, and I didn't know how to share that with people as a part of me without it, because it was so foreign to my vanilla white family and farm, it was almost comical when I would show, the first time I went back to Alaska to visit the one time, and I went back, I think I had braids in my hair, like with like cloth woven into them. You know, I had my Birkin, and I mean, they thought I was a freak.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was not even close to what
was
what
an
the
Ashland?
real, what the real experience was. I mean, and I wasn't. So, and I never was hardcore, but, anyways, it was just, and it never dawned on me to figure out how to authentically have those conversations. Right.
Right. You were just going.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to school, you're working.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still being social? Because you were
100%.
still hanging out with all of us
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and making new friends and hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, because you weren't going to school, did you ramp up the partying during that time?
I think so. I mean, I kind of ramped up the partying even in the dorms, because at some point I ended up with my own room because my original roommate moved out or went back home. And I, at the time, convinced my parents or my mom, you know, hey, if I keep my own room, it'll do better for school. And what that meant was another friend who did not go to school, and worked usually Friday, Saturdays, whatever. Then we started partying like different days, and then she'd crash in my room because I had a space. She didn't have to go home. And so and those things become like real, like, oh, are we doing Tuesday? Are we doing, you know what I mean? It's like, it creeps up on you. And for me personally, alcohol eased a lot of the anxiety, right? The social stuff where I felt like, I mean, I still feel like this, that like people won't remember my name. They won't remember who I am. I'm not identifiable enough that people would know who I am. I have that problem at work. And I know, and what's interesting is I'm proven wrong often, and I still feel that way.
That's so interesting.
And I've been in my company for 10 years. I still feel that way.
You feel that way, or that's the reality?
I feel that way.
Interesting.
And you felt that way in school or in Ashland?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Oh, 100%.
I guarantee you, if you ask anybody from those days, you remember Kendall, they'd be like, yeah, I remember Kendall. Guaranteed. No doubt.
You know, there's people that I think would remember me. You know, there's a core group, of course, like the Guam House folks and some, but there's like some peripheral of those that, you know, I have memories of. And the interesting thing is, though, as I don't like retain names and those kind of things. And I don't know. I haven't done a good job of that. I think it's just my brain takes in weird information, and then it can't store all the things. But then I can remember if somebody else talks about it.
Yeah, but that could be part of that ADHD.
Yeah.
You know, which again could have been one of the reasons why school was so frustrating at that time.
And like now as an older adult, and certainly menopausal and all the things, which I've been in for a while because of surgeries and stuff. But like my immediate recall is awful. And so it always makes me nervous, like on a call or something for work, you know, and it's like, okay, I got to make these scribble, and my handwriting's atrocious. So that's even worse. But then it's like an hour or 2 hours later, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I got to do that thing. Right. Like I'll get off a call and know I need to do something, and then it doesn't come to me for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
It stresses me out, and it's something I'm going to try to kind of look into a little bit more, because I got to figure out some better coping skills on it, because it makes me nervous. The older I get, it makes me nervous. I'm going to lose that 2 hours.
Right.
It'll become 4 and 6.
Or the middle of the night, which I also have that, where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to get up and look at that on the computer, because I won't go back to sleep if I don't settle myself. So anyway, sorry.
No. Did you find that, since you were using alcohol with social anxiety, did it become an issue?
It might have. I was never like drinking to go to work or anything. It was never that. I was very much of a social drinker, and still am. Like I don't sit and have a glass of wine at home. I don't have a cocktail at home or anything. That's just not my vibe. I would say it was an issue because the longer I stayed in Ashland, so we lived together sophomore year essentially, and then following that, I moved so many times.
Well, we lived in that big house together the next year.
Yeah, but only for a period of time.
Yeah. And you weren't in school then. You were working.
I was working.
The rest of us, there was a bunch of us that lived there. Yeah. Then we got kicked out.
Yeah.
I think you and Winters, I think, had a real sweet place.
On the corner.
Right up from the
library.
And Elisa,
yeah, by the
too.
library. Yeah.
And Elisa lived there.
Elisa was there for a while.
So I had this little hollow room in the back, which I love. I love.
Yes.
Love my little cozy spot.
Little cozy cave.
Bed on the floor kind of thing. But that was a great house. still is a great house.
Yeah.
It's an actual family home now. But before that, before we ended up, I mean, I just bounced around. I think I lived at Wintress's mom's house for a little bit. There was some till we got settled.
So your life in Ashland at that point, most of your friends that you had made when you arrived are still going to school, and your life is kind of pivoting to spending more time with people who work
or don't go to school,
don't go to school, and then partying with them because you kind of drifted a little bit out of our quote unquote group at that time,
because that was me, right? Because I was self-conscious about the fact that that I didn't have that commonality anymore, right? Not that we all sat around and talked about school,
right,
but just that piece of it. And then I also what I've done for a very long time, and I don't know if it was like prior to high school, but I know in high school it started. I was very much one of the persons that was like, okay, I've got my people, my friends or whatever, but I'm going to take care of you, right? I'm going to make sure you're okay. Everybody needed me. And I got things in return, but I didn't get a lot of it in return. And so that was always at the detriment of my emotional well-being, but I had no idea, right? No idea about that. And so that transferred into college, right? And so like at freshman dorms, I think there was a gal that I was like that with, early on. And then I was like that with you. It was not to my detriment, but it was just like, I was very involved in your life. And which was our life, right, in the sense of like all of our people. So that was easy.
Yes.
But then as I got other people, then I changed the focus, right?
Right.
And that was the pivot.
Yeah, because Wintress then became your focus.
Wintress and Nadine at that point really became a focus. And it wasn't because they were like, to the college kids or anything like that. It was a different experience. We didn't have the same, you guys were studying. You were, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we said.
Some more than others, but no. And so it was easy just to kind of pivot from that, but then still bounce in and out. Right. And yeah, there was a divide there a little bit, which I regret greatly and have.
But I think you were going through your own processing too, because you were kind of living this covert life still where your folks thought you were going to college.
Yeah. I think by that time, by the time we moved up to that one house that we got kicked out of, I don't think I was fibbing on the
college
thing at that point. I think they knew I was only working. I hope so. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of like
it's
where
okay at this point.
Blur the edges of it.
Yeah.
But I was living to, I was a Big Al gal.
Yes.
We keep talking about Big Al's. Shout out to Big Al's. I was a Big Al gal. We pooled our tips. We'd go, get in the car and go to dead shows in California and go drive around. And live in a different kind of bohemian lifestyle at the time.
Yeah. You were having a great time. It was a great life, having a great time.
It was a lot of fun. It was not a lot of substance.
Right. So what made you make a change?
So honestly, circumstances, because Wintress decided she was going to go to school and she was going to go to California to do it.
So Wintress was going to go to school in California?
Yeah, she was going to go to school in California and I was going to go with her because it was like basically the band was breaking up, right?
Yeah.
And so I was going to do that, put it in the notice at work. Both of us, we had a big going away party out at Kurt's. We burnt our Big Al shirts. I've got really cool pictures of that. Actually, Mason was there. Literally, I think I had a panic attack, not physically, but just realized I can't move to California.
Yeah.
No, I can't do that. And at that point, my mom and dad had actually moved back down from Alaska, had repurchased the house that my dad had built us before we moved up to Alaska.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That he was able to get that house.
It was weird though, because literally, there'd been, we'll say 8-10 years in between that time.
Yeah.
Everything was exactly the same.
Wow.
The wallpaper my mom had used in the 70s or the 80s, anyway, it was very weird. But, and so my dad was there, but my mom had moved back to Alaska. So they'd been there a year.
Yeah.
And my mom realized that she couldn't give up her retirement prospects from Alaska. And so she went back up to Alaska. My dad was still in the house, and my brother was there because he was a junior when she moved down, which that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
He had just, when he graduated in 92, he moved out the same day and moved in with his girlfriend. So my dad's in this house and they're trying to sell it. And so at that point it was like, okay, I could move back up there and live, up there until they sell this house. But for whatever reason, I didn't do that right away. And I don't know why, because I actually ended up living with a friend for I stayed at Big Isles for like a couple months and then stayed in town. I don't really know why. That kind of feels like a lost period, honestly, when I think back on it. I don't remember much of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I moved. That's how I got from Ashland then back up to the Oregon City, Beavercreek area.
Okay.
And then I've never left until recently. I'd never left kind of that core area. I'd lived in Milwaukee and Gladstone, that kind of thing. But I've been in that same little.
What year would you say that was then? Around like
93.
93?
I think 90. When did you graduate?
93.
Yeah. So I was up there in 93.
93.
Okay. Yeah. Because I wasn't like when you guys graduated, I had to come down. I'd come down to visit, and you'd come up sometimes to visit and stuff. So yeah, that was 93.
So then you started working up there?
Working at Emporium.
Emporium. I forgot about Emporium.
Yeah.
That's right. You worked at Emporium.
Troutman's Emporium. Did not have to wear pantyhose to that job.
That's nice.
Yeah, I was in the junior section.
Well, hello.
But then I eventually became part of the office. Anyways,
oh boy.
I know. Big time.
Moving up.
But yeah, I did that and lived in the house that they were trying to sell. And then I think I lived there maybe 5 months, something like that. Like maybe fall to February-ish. And they sold the house. And so because it was the middle of my school, my mom couldn't come down, pack up the stuff and, take it up. So they basically came down, packed up the stuff, moved it into an apartment in Gladstone, and I lived in the apartment rent-free.
With all the stuff.
With my mom's stuff. My mom decorated it.
Oh, okay.
So my mother. I love Barbara. Yeah, she decorated. I mean, it was fully her house. And I just lived in the spare bedroom.
Oh, that's so funny.
It was rent-free.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you hummed along and
met some friends.
Yeah.
And then actually dated a friend of my brother's, which wasn't really anything, and then ended up meeting my now ex-husband.
Right.
And so that would have been, I don't know if we were together when you graduated or not. I don't think so.
No, but shortly after.
Shortly after. So by 94-ish, probably. Sometime in there.
And how did you meet him?
I met him at that other ex-boyfriend's house. They were all friends from high school. And I was still friends with the guy. I mean, it wasn't anything serious.
Right.
And we were hanging out, and he came over one night, and that was it, quite honestly.
So from the time you met till when, like, how much time span was there between the time you met and when you got married?
Almost 4 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because if we met around, maybe we met like fall of 93. We got married December of 97.
Oh, okay.
But we were off and on, and but we partied. That's what we did together.
So would you say that we've done some episodes about, before you get married, talk about your expectations in a relationship, expectations in a marriage, how you see your roles. Brian and I got married young at 23, but even then we kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
Would you say that you guys kind of had those conversations in preparation for getting married?
Absolutely not. I mean, I look back on it now, and I feel like I didn't even have those conversations with you. Like, what do you see? Or, how do you think you'll be married? Like before Brian or anything, right? It's just like, it didn't dawn on me to have a conversation about it, right? It was like, that was just the next step.
Right.
And I was conditioned for the next step, right? But we didn't have a lot of conversations, deep, meaningful, history conversations, or it was unfortunately just very surface, and then it was focused on drinking a lot, like, weekend drinking, that kind of thing. But, we had a core group of friends that were kind of all, it was like multiple couples that like were all friends. And then there was these extraneous guys that they all went to high school with. It was very guy centric to those guys. And there was the 3 girls, and yeah, it was very, I would tell you it was fun at the time, because it was, but there was, again, not any substance, right?
So then do you think you married him because you thought, okay, I'm supposed to get married now? And this is somebody I've been with off and on for 4 years, and
I fought for it.
And
or fought for him, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the other thing is, I read a lot as a young person, and then, continually until the last few years, actually. And, it was all trivial stuff. I didn't read educational, like, self-help or anything, but it was, every relationship was this like push pull, and then everything worked out in the end. Right. And I also think that I thought I'd fix him.
Right.
Right. So, I won't talk about his story, but, he had rough growing up and all that. And I really thought that it would be kind of like, what I was modeled, my mom wore the pants.
Right.
My dad did a lot of hard labor work and always was hustling and stuff, but he didn't, farming and all that. Like one year you make great money, the next year tomorrow you've lost it. Right. And my mom was stability. And so I really thought that was what marriage was. And not to wear the pants, like to be the boss, but just to be the control,
the stable one.
And some of the control, as far as like, this is how we're going to raise kids. This is how, but we didn't have those conversations.
So you were mirroring your parents' marriage, but with not communicating about any of that with each other.
Because
or
I don't
your
think,
mom.
Or my mom, and I don't think my mom and dad communicated about any of that.
Right.
Right.
So probably in your mind, you probably didn't even think there needed to be communication because it worked with your parents. So it must just happen. So if we get married, because we got married, things will just happen.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
That communication doesn't really have anything to do with it. It just happens naturally.
Yeah.
Not realizing, either if you're really going to have this authentic united front, you have to have communication, or you just figure out how to function and be in that marriage and accept certain things.
Right. Yeah. And I really thought that, okay, once we do this will settle down, or once we do that, that'll settle down. And the realities of that was it would and wouldn't, right? It would ebb and flow, and then it, eventually didn't. But
and it did that push pull.
Yeah.
That you thought that's normal.
Yeah. And I was talking about this with somebody else recently, and basically she's like, that's a dopamine fix, right? She's like, you were trained, and that's that validation thing, even from a child, right? It's validation. It's like a dopamine fix. And, I smoked for years. There's other things, right? Like I didn't do anything too crazy, but there's some, alcohol could be a dopamine fix because, I am a fun drunk.
Yes, you are. I am here to say
I'm a good time.
She's a great time
until I'm done. And it's not that I'm angry, but I'm just I'm going to bed now.
Yes.
But yeah, it's because it's the happy things, right? It's the pleasure piece of it, and that's why when I left Ashland, the decision to leave Ashland to go to either California or the other was like, I knew enough at that moment that I had to leave Ashland. I could not stay there.
Yeah.
Because had I stayed, I would have probably become an alcoholic, because I could go to the bar by myself in Ashland, because it was that bubble. I don't know that you can do that now. I don't know.
But
it's, I could go out there. It was relatively safe at the time. We wandered the streets, just
it's totally
being
safe.
Silly, in the middle of the night. And I knew enough at that time that I needed to get out. And Ashland had started to change a little bit too.
Yeah.
Right before you guys kind of graduated, it got a little rougher.
We had to get out too, though.
Yeah, it got
you grew out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I also think it got a little rougher around the edges in some ways, or maybe it just the veil comes off. The Ashland lighting brightens.
Yeah. I think that a lot of Californians were moving in, and they were changing the culture of it. I personally think that we got the best years of Ashland,
100%.
And then it changed. And I think for any magical fairy tale college town, because there's scattered all throughout America. I think it serves a purpose. But I think it's important for the people that go to college there to leave because or it stunts your growth. I think it serves a purpose for those kids going in, and it's a precious time.
Yeah.
But then I think you need to leave, or else it can take a really bad turn.
I'm curious. Did you get pressure at all from your parents? I'm guessing not, but did you have any pressure to get married?
No.
Or did they try to talk you out of it, or were they neutral on the whole thing?
So they did not try to talk me out of it. I always thought that they didn't really approve. I don't think they ever did, but they didn't say it. But there was like a judgment level that I always kind of felt from the jump, which was real hard for me. And, but it didn't stop me. I think I just thought,
dug in deeper.
I probably did. And it's not because they, you know,
it was just a vibe you got. And in a way, maybe you were rebelling a little bit.
I think, I mean,
kind of
rebelling or, just, I know my own, it's fine, you know?
Yeah.
But no, they never said outright.
Yeah.
And my dad would never have probably said any of it. My dad and I we didn't chat like that, you know? Yeah. If you rode in the truck with him, you know, he picked me up from Ashland to drive me up. And I think, you know, we spoke very peripherally, and then we listened to country music. So,
right.
But we were together, and I think I've told you this separately, but you know, my family was not a demonstrative family, right? And a lot of families aren't, but we grew up, we didn't say I love you, even with my grandma, who's like, wasn't the most important. We didn't say I love you, but there was no doubt that wasn't the case.
Right.
But it just, so to talk about emotional things or something was just foreign. It was absolutely foreign. Or to ask for guidance.
Right. It just sounds like you didn't grow up with communication.
No.
And things were just very surface.
Yeah.
So when it came to that point in your life, it probably would have been natural for them to go along with whatever you were doing without having a conversation.
And I think my mom's stance was if she fought it, it would dig in deeper and it would create a rift, and then that would create more problems, right? And so, which I see her point.
Yeah.
Like, at being a parent myself, I totally can understand and relate to that. Knowing me, like she knew me at that time, I think she certainly had a reason to think it.
Right.
It's kind of fascinating because I think there's two things. If you tie it back to our whole podcast concept, but that lack of communication is quintessential Gen X stuff with your mom and dad and lack of communication. And then in some ways, you almost married a similar person that your mom did.
Yep.
And it's interesting.
With different baggage.
Totally. Great way to put it. Yeah.
But very similar in that way, and trying to get to the meat of anything later on. Once I realized there was something else missing, you know, or needing more, then it was like that whole concept of like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you need XYZ? Because that's not what you needed, you know, a week ago or whatever.
Right.
And then it was almost like, so it, and then I didn't even really have the right words to articulate it anyway. And then at some point you don't trust somebody, so you're not going to, and you just, it creates a whole bunch of noise.
So how would you sum up your marriage?
Well, there's a lot of sarcastic things I'd like to say.
You can say whatever you want, because we can always edit stuff out if necessary.
I'm sarcastic about mine too. So you're fine.
I mean, you can go as deep into this as you want, but to give an idea of what you went through for people who maybe have gone through similar things.
This would be a surprise for a lot of people that know me now even, but I would tell you I was emotionally abused through a lot of it, if not most of it. There would be great years of positive, fine, and fine now I wouldn't accept. The fine then I wouldn't accept now. But it was fine. I got two fantastic children out of it who are amazing and the loves of my life. But I didn't serve myself out of it at all. And I spent too many years not realizing that, and or disassociated from the whole thing. This is a journey that I'm starting. I think this kind of leans back to the pod too, right? But I'm calling this the year of me, and my intentions, right? I don't do like New Year's resolutions and all that kind of stuff, but for the first time in my life, I wrote down things this year, and I just put them on the fridge. And it's not like a checklist, like do them all, but it's like, these are the things that I would like to get out of it. And it's everything from, I want to start eating better. I want to start, moving my body. It's not even about losing weight, all the things, to like, okay, I need to unpack some stuff that isn't just the marriage, but it's the stuff before that too, which all accumulates into everything. And up until this point, I've had all these other focuses, and rightfully so, in my opinion. I wouldn't change the last 10 years of my life. I wouldn't change for a thing, because I had to focus on those children and make sure they were okay. And I did, and they are. And they've done their own work, and they are amazing children, and they will become even more amazing adults. I mean, they're adults now, both of them, but my baby boy's an adult. But it's this is about, it's time to reflect on me, and I have the energy now to do it, right? I don't, I'm, the only thing that's different in my energy now is I'm what I call, and this isn't my term, I've heard this elsewhere, but the sandwich generation. So I've got a mom, that I'm very involved with. She's totally independent. She's, in a great community and all the things, but I'm very involved with her life, and she with mine. And we have the most authentic relationship we've ever had. But she lived through the last 10 years with me.
Right.
Can I pull this forward?
Yeah.
So when my marriage dissolved finally, or when I dissolved my marriage finally, my mom actually ended up, she had retired from teaching in Sisters, Oregon, and moved over to Oregon City into her own place and everything. And she effectively helped me. She was a co-parent to me. She really helped with kids, just, ferrying people about, picking up kids from school, whatever, so I could work. And so that's a real good source. But I do have a lot of, I'm focused on her a lot too, but I have time to be focused on me. So
is this the first time you feel like you've had time for yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry, I cut you off, but
No.
You're reclaiming your energy.
Yes. What's interesting is I knew I deserved it all along, but for the first time I believe it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I have the energy. Thankfully, I have the financial ability to do so, which is, backing up, to be honest, one of the reasons I was able to finally, one of the many reasons, there was lots of reasons that it finally needed to end, but is I was finally in a financial position to leave and not need any support to do so. And so I could figure out what my exit was and make it all happen.
So would you say that's a huge catalyst in this for women who are in an abusive marriage? The financial part is probably one of the main reasons they are stuck.
Absolutely. And even if it's not abusive, even if they're just unhappy. Right. Even if it's just not the right fit, and they live with a man who just doesn't communicate, but there's nothing, like they're not, it's absolutely, it's unfortunate, because I thought years prior to that, I'd been planning to leave for years, off and on. We'd go through these lulls or whatever. And the thing that always threw me was I didn't think I could do it. Ironically, looking back, I could have. And had I been open to what was going on, or not even all of it, but just more so, my parents would have helped me in a heartbeat. Other people would have helped me in a heartbeat had they needed to. Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Well, I think there's a lot of women that are in situations like that and don't share with, is it shame? Is that the reason?
Oh, 100% it's shame, which is, I don't know why it's shame.
Right. Because it doesn't make sense.
No.
Because when you're in that situation, you're the victim.
Yeah.
But the victim feels shame for being in that situation and has a problem asking for help because of that. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Yeah. And there's this belief that I can do it myself. And so, I've got myself into this, so I can fix
a little
it.
Stubbornness in a way.
I don't know. Maybe that's not the word, but determination. Yeah. Like something, and that's why those lulls and the peaks and the valleys, right? Like when it peaked, you're like, okay, cool, we made it to this. Yay, we made it here. And then we'd have a good period of time. And there was, unfortunately, he was very good at recognizing when he'd almost gone too far. And then he'd, come back, right? And
pull you back in.
Yeah. And I would just, and it wasn't like, I don't mean it's like, oh, all of a sudden he got wine and roses and da-da-da-da. No, it was just those subtle things that like, I thought were, okay, cool. We're in this partnership now, right? Like I look at some of the folks, I have a really good group that works with me, and they're all, they're all in their 30s. So millennials. Yeah. And I don't get in their big details, but the way they talk about their partners and their family life and everything. And I'm just like, holy crap. Wow. That is what partnership looks like.
Yeah.
That's what's like when you come home from work, somebody asks you how your day was, and not just that they asked you, but they listen and they actually give a crap. Yeah. Right. Like, I have other friends who, sure, but their partner knows who they work with and what they do and what that means. And like, no, you don't need to know all the hairy details of what I do, but you need to know I'm important at work and I'm validated at work, and that should mean something because it's supported you for all these years. Yes. In part. So,
right. Do you remember when you talked about how, you didn't feel in general that you have an impact on people? They won't remember you. Mm-hmm. So, do you think that came into play in your marriage where it was very easy for you to believe anything negative he told you about yourself?
Oh, that's really interesting. Wow. Probably. Certainly negative conversations and, yes. Not just about me, but my family and, how things should be or shouldn't be or whatever. But yeah, probably so. And also he was a person that everybody knew, especially in our little town, right? Because he'd grown up there and never left. And, he was the guy, when you went to the bar, everybody knew his name, and he was the big personality, and he was the fun guy. And it's like, oh, you're married to him? And it's like, huh. And, I'm not out every weekend like he is and all the things. So once we got married, we actually got pregnant right away. And so that really changed. And from his perspective, I think I wasn't focused on him anymore. My focus was the kids.
Yeah.
And that was probably beyond just other things. I think that was the death knell for that. But me being invisible in a way, yes. I had that already. Right. I had that feeling. But yeah, that was probably part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was the catalyst in getting out? Like you said, it was probably your job, right? Money that you could actually financially get yourself out.
I got a really good job that was with a company I had no idea about, that I'm still with, and have been. They're a company that supported growth in me. And my boss created my job description that I got hired from and had no idea really what he needed. And I came into it, and I've written every job description since, right? And as I've promoted up and lead a team now and blah, blah, blah. But
which is amazing. Like, can we take a moment for that?
It is.
That is amazing.
I'm proud of myself.
Yes, it's very impactful. It's huge.
It's very huge, and I actually believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is the first. I've always felt validated at work and important in my roles, but they were a little bit more administrative or, that type of thing. And this is the first time, and certainly, a company that supports that growth, creates loyalty.
I wonder,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it sounds like we've been touching on the financial aspect, but it feels like you had the confidence
Yeah.
to leave based on some of the wins you got in your professional life and building up your say self-esteem, your confidence level. You got this.
Yeah, I think all of that. There was some stuff that happened before that. I actually had surgery and gotten really quite ill and almost died.
Do you mind? Are you comfortable sharing what surgery?
Yeah. So I had 14 years ago, I think now, I had a full hysterectomy, so everything, and so I've been on estrogen since then. And I also had bladder sling surgery
at the same time.
At the same time.
What was it called?
Bladder sling surgery. So it's like once women have babies,
yeah,
you get
the female bits,
and things. Yes.
Why did you have the hysterectomy?
Because I had endometriosis, and so I was. What I didn't know at the time was I was like completely overdosing also on ibuprofen and everything. So like, and it was because of that you build up a tolerance. I mean, it's like anything, you build up a tolerance. And so then I was like constant. If I took ibuprofen because I had a headache, because I'd get rebound headaches because I'm taking so much of it, I'd take 5 of the highest one, right? And so it was like, so that, there's a lot of things going on inside your body for that, but the endometriosis was why I had the hysterectomy. And unfortunately, I went home with a catheter, and that weekend I developed sepsis basically, and they took me to the hospital in an ambulance, and I was in ICU for I think 3 days, 2 days for sure, maybe 3. Then they transferred me into Portland at Portland Prov off of 84 because my liver had started and my kidneys were shutting down. And so I was in the dialysis unit, but I did not, thankfully, they rebounded. I didn't need dialysis, but I was on some really crazy antibiotics, which is why now I'm deaf in one ear.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I was in that hospital for another 5 days, I think. Went home, and then my aunt says I was like I was an episode of House, that old show, which I never watched, but I was home like 2 days, and they ended up taking me back to the hospital, and I basically had a little mini stroke. I had a little mini heart attack, and I mean, my body just like blew up inside. I mean, in some weird way. So I was back in the ICU in Oregon City, I think for 4 days. And then was on a bunch of stuff, came home, but recovered from that, thankfully. But literally almost died twice.
Right.
Which sounds very dramatic, but it's true. And I do have to say, I appreciate my ex-husband, because had he not, so the first time when they prescribed me the pain medicine, they overprescribed it. And so he was following the regimen because I was kind of out of it.
Yeah.
And he actually, like, I was sleeping and he tried to wake me up to give me the pain medicine, and he couldn't wake me up.
Okay.
And so that was like, if he had not tried, I'd be gone.
Because of the pain medicine and OD on the pain medicine?
No, because of the sepsis.
Because
the sepsis has already started.
Okay.
But which we didn't know.
Right.
Which you could tell if you looked at the because I was on a catheter, you could tell when you saw that. But so if he hadn't tried. So when I say the overprescribing the pain medicine, he had elected, and actually this was smart of him. He was like, okay, I'm going to dose this differently, but I'm going to prescribe it. Like, they just were giving me too much at one time. And anyway, so he did save my life. So I will definitely.
That's a trip. That was during the opioid epidemic,
100%,
really,
yeah.
when the doctors were overprescribing.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. And yeah, my doctor might have contributed to some things. I don't know now, and it, who knows? But after something like that happens, you really start to go, wait a minute, like, I'm here for something, right? Like, I'm not here to just sit in my room after I get home and feed the kids. And not, like, our home life at that point was very much, we came home, my ex would be in the living room playing. I mean, that was his domain, and we weren't really invited to hang out. And if you did, you had to listen to him on the game. And, that gets real old, listening to Call of Duty and all that. And so the kids and I went to our rooms, and we had a pretty small house, and, that was it. And so that was the existence. And the kids and I were real close, still are. But that's no way to live your life. It's just not an existence. But I was so disassociated for a long time that was my existence.
Right.
But so that was the wake up call, I think. And I went to therapy for a while after that, because I'm like, this doesn't, like, there's got to be more to this.
Right.
And my therapist was real good about leading me to a point, and I stopped therapy because we got to the point where it was pretty obvious that I really had a path. I had a decision tree.
You were at a crossroads, right? Yeah.
And I wasn't ready to make the crossroads yet. And what made the crossroads, and I was temporarily working at another company because I'd been laid off at a long time job. I was working for another company out in Beaverton.
Quite the drive.
But that's when I got the job where I'm at now. And then it was like, okay, I'm being paid what I'm worth. I'm being told I'm worth it, and I hadn't really even started moving up yet. But those things just start to add up. And then you're like, okay, I can make this next plan. Right. And then things were escalating at home too. And that was real apparent. Sorry, there's a bug.
Yeah.
Things were escalating at home, and it was real clear that they had never been physical. And, I don't know for sure that they would have become, but it didn't look good for either of us, and the tools I had before to de-escalate things weren't working anymore.
Right.
And the effect this was having on the kids, the shame that I have is that it took me so long to think about that in the way that it made me do something, because all along they were being affected the same way. They had their own issues with him that I was always like playing middle ground, right? To keep them protected, from the verbal or whatever. That worked ish. The more we talk, the more kids and I talk about it now,
right.
It's like, okay, that wasn't doing enough, but I thought it was helping at the time. But yeah, so that financial piece was a really big catalyst for me to say, okay, I can figure this out. I can afford an apartment if I need to. I can do, which I ended up being able to. Well, I walked away with nothing from the marriage because we had a house and I sold him the house for $1. The house was in my name. And
did you do that because you just needed to be done?
I needed to not be entangled with him in any way. I didn't want him to fight me on any way that I wanted to handle the kid situation, which didn't work out the way I wanted it in the end as far as how I thought that was going to go. But it was what I knew would get him there, or what I thought would get him there, I should say, because he did always kind of have this I mean, he threatened that he would fight me for the kids, and I couldn't have bore that.
Right.
Could not have bore that. And so to me, the money didn't matter, because I could at least support us by myself without needing like, parental help or something. Although it could have been there if I needed it.
Right.
But the money wasn't worth it.
I think that's so telling that of what you had been put through and what that part of your life was like, that a house that you purchased, you
for us,
for you guys, but you purchased it, that you were willing to sell that to him for $1. I mean, I think that just says it.
Yeah.
Right there. That's how desperately you needed to be away.
I paid for my sanity.
Right.
With that, which is fine.
Right.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
And he didn't, I didn't take any support from or help for the kids. He was in school at the time to become to do better, which was great. And he did, which is great. He's living his life. And he lives it the way he wants.
Right.
Which is fine. but I didn't want to be beholden to him in any way, because then there would have been a sense of control that he could have had. Right. There would have always been this, out here. And so, anyway, so we did, I was able to buy my little place, ironically, where your mom lived.
Yeah.
Back in the day. And, it was a great oasis for us.
So let me ask you this. You buy a beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath home?
Yeah.
A beautiful room for your daughter, for your son, and you have your own room. What did it feel like to have this space that was completely safe and calm and peaceful and yours? Was that an adjustment?
It was, because I would catch myself thinking, oh, I got to go in the room and watch the TV. And it's like, no, I don't. I can sit on my couch and watch TV.
Yeah.
As much, like I watch TV in my room now. Like, in the morning I watch the news because I'm a Gen X. I like to have my morning news. And when I'm getting ready, and then, every once in a while in the evening, like when I'm going to bed, I'm like, okay, I'm going to finish this program before I go to sleep. But I before, that's the only place I ever watched television except for Friday nights, because he was gone every Friday night. And so that was the kids and I's like safe night.
Right.
That was our fun night. We had fast food Fridays. I mean, anyways, it's just kind of crazy. But yeah, it was like I exhaled after being underwater for years. And the hard part was just dealing with the aftershocks of all the other stuff, right? So once you're away from the daily part of it, then you settle into like, what in the hell I've just put myself and my children through for all these years. And now you're dealing with guilt on top of shame. And that's what I went to therapy for a while on that, and actually did some work called EMDR. I think I did the initials right, because I was having I wasn't having full-blown panic attacks, but it's like if I would just think about certain things, it was like I was having a physical reaction to it.
Right.
And so she really helped kind of get me past that. And then I still use that tool even now, like my safe place I use to help me go to sleep if I'm anxious or my brain won't shut up.
Right.
And then just, giving me more language. And then it pivoted from the thing with that therapy for me is I really only worked that immediate trauma of like getting out of it. Right.
Yeah.
And then then I pivoted to the kids, because both of them were in different ways in their own chaos. And I was needing to help manage them and get them their therapy, which, you can only leave work early and so many times. And so the focus became them, rightfully so, in my opinion.
Right.
And I was okay. I was managing, I was maintaining, I wasn't disassociating, I was present, all of that. And so we got through, living, that, and, my son had some real issues at the end of high school. We got him through that. And then, he kind of blossomed in his own way, and he's done more work on himself later, and is, really present and going to change how he has relationships in the future and all that, which I'm so thankful for. And then my daughter, went through some pretty significant things in high school. Of course, she was a COVID kid as far as high school. So
yeah,
there was that. There was some other
in Oregon too, where it was shut down. Yeah.
So, yeah, because some come to find out, like it wasn't like that everywhere else.
Not in Florida.
Had no idea.
Yeah,
I would have come earlier.
Did her question around you're sitting there in your own place, it's safe, and you described what it was like for you. Did the kids have a similar type of experience? Did you guys ever talk about that? Were they relieved as well?
Yes, after. So when we initially, that first year we were split up, the idea would be, because I'd seen this pattern by some other family members, and it worked really well, was that, okay, we'll do a week on, week off, right? And we were less than a mile away from each other. And I drove by that house every single day.
Which is crazy.
Until May 7th of last year.
But who's counting?
Yeah.
Who's counting?
No, that's just like a retrigger.
And I mean, it became less of a thing later on. But yeah, it was just like, I just went by there a while back because I went to visit old friends in my neighborhood, and I'm like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, they did once we got that first year when we did that week on week off, which ended up failing miserably. Once they were permanently in my home, I think, and once my son kind of got through some of his stuff, they did. I mean, my place was a safe place. I was always a safe place.
Yeah.
And I think we got closer because the conversations got way more real. Because when I was still with my ex and we were all in the home, we weren't talking about it at that level. Like, and granted, the kids were younger, all the things, but we didn't, I was just playing interference all the time, but we didn't talk about what just happened. It was like this. We didn't talk about the fact that, he came home at 2:00 in the morning and punched a hole in the door, and we're fighting and screaming, and my son's comforting my daughter,
Right.
I mean, we did talk about it, but not, and so those things we actually talked about.
Yeah.
Those are the things.
Did they come to you with it?
Yeah. Yeah. They still do. I find it very interesting when we get together, for any length of time, and not just if they're both there, because my son lives in another state now, but even individually, very often things come up, and they just need to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about it anymore, like, because it breaks my heart, but they need to talk about it.
They're unpacking it.
Yeah. And that's okay. And I'll talk about it as long as you need to talk about it. And
you're their safe person to unpack it with, and you understand.
Yes. And that's the thing. We all understand the same thing.
You guys trauma bonded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they don't have to explain certain things to you because you get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and you don't do that with your friends,
right?
That in school and stuff. So, anyways, but yeah. So yeah, I think it was their safe place, and certainly, all of us. And I learned a lot from them. Honestly, they started pushing on me to, especially my daughter, to be more authentic. I mean, I will tell you that I didn't start to feel like my own authentic person until I left that. And then it was like, part of that is then I started to talk about things that were happening that I didn't share. I have friends to this day that had no idea the level of it, and they saw the fights, they saw the drunken things that might happen, but they had no idea the level of it. And I might even say that some of them might think that I'm exaggerating.
Right. But I think that happens.
Yeah.
Because typically when the woman is in that situation, part of her peacekeeping is downplaying what's going on.
Absolutely.
And keeping it the dirty little secret.
Yeah.
So if they were there, they think they saw what they saw, but they didn't see what was going on. So they're only seeing their perception.
Yeah.
Not reality.
Yeah. And that's hard for me sometimes, though, because I need some of them too.
Yeah.
Right? I need them to acknowledge it and not downplay it themselves.
And believe you.
Yeah.
And believe that this happened to you.
Yeah.
Are they common friends you're referring to, or just?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that probably is that might be aggravating a little bit. Although they're not, I mean, I would tell you they're not his friends now. They're not, you know what I mean? But by association, there's some real tight circles.
Yeah.
Right? And
fuck him.
Spoken as someone who's known Kendall since she was 18, so he's feeling a little protective.
I mean, seriously though, like, if
I know,
fuck them. Who cares?
But
it's your life. It's your reality.
It is. And I mean, I keep speaking it. I don't shut up about it or whatever. Yeah. And I don't need to talk about it all the time to them. I don't mean it like that.
It'd just be nice, right? Be nice if they acknowledged it.
Yeah. And so
I think though, sometimes when people are bystanders to an abusive relationship, one of the reasons I think it's easier for them to think it wasn't as bad as it was, because then they have to accept that they may have some guilt, because maybe, and even if they're blameless, really,
right, absolutely,
but they may then feel, oh, I should have done something, or I should have seen it, or I should have stepped in, or why didn't I see what was going on in front of me? So even if that's not true, they may be feeling, sometimes people feel that way, so that they're like, I'm going to pretend it wasn't as bad as it was. because it relinquishes me of any responsibility. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the case.
They don't have, and nobody else has any responsibility.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
Like, my mom my mom's just like, it kills her. Right?
Of course.
Because I hid things real well. I mean, she knew peripherally things weren't great. She had no idea. She does now because my kids will talk about it in front of her, and it kills her. But I think it's my mom is a more authentic person now, I think, than she ever was too. Maybe that's age for her. I don't know.
Your children,
my children, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They certainly have a more authentic relationship. They don't hide things from her.
It's interesting. You're using the term authentic, and I've found as our kids have gotten older, it's authentic. We have very authentic relationships. It's an amazing thing.
Right.
But part of that is them holding us accountable as they've gotten older. And do you find that your kids are doing that with you?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Amelia calls me on my shit all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I hate and I love all the same.
Yeah.
Totally.
Same thing. She went through some pretty significant stuff kind of in the high school era, and we had to do some family counseling, thankfully, for it too. And I mean, it's because it was really interesting during some of that time. I really reverted to like how I was brought up. It's like, what do you mean it's not that bad? And it's not that bad. That's not your right reality. And that was the thing. She had her reality, her memories of it, whether they happened or not. And they, in her mind, they did. And I would be like, that didn't happen. No, that didn't happen. And like, now I'm just like, I'm sorry. Like, that's the worst thing. I did that to my brother for years about us coming down here in the summertime for Alaska. Because he for years would give my mom a wrath about it. Like, I didn't get to stay and play baseball and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? We were with our family. We got to go camping. We got to go to Disneyland. We did da, 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 da. Well, his reality was he wanted to stay home and play baseball with his friends.
Yeah.
And that was his experience. And I told him that this last summer. I'm like, look, I'm never going to give you crap about that again. And I'm sorry I did, because that's what you wanted. And I get it.
It's so funny because we were not brought up to really pay attention to other people's realities.
Yeah.
It was like, it's just the reality we all share. It is what it is. We all were there at the same thing.
Right.
Everybody experienced it differently.
Yeah.
But you didn't really acknowledge that. It was just this collective thing that
absolutely
we can all agree on.
I think we were all just powering through, we didn't have guidance really. We didn't have anyone checking in with us emotionally or physically in a lot of ways too. So we were all just kind of pioneering things. We have been pioneering our life since we were children, and we're still pioneering. We're pioneering. I've talked about this old age, the second half of our life, quote unquote old age. But I feel like Gen X is a big pioneering generation because we've had to be.
We've had to.
But as a result, you're right, Brian. Like we all just kind of were in this shared experience, and we just kind of did it. No one was really talking to each other.
Well, it's interesting because we're the sandwich generation, as you call it, is, my mom is from the silent generation. She doesn't really share a whole lot.
No.
But then we have kids that are zillennials, millennials, and they share everything.
Just Gen Z and Zillennials. We don't have any millennials.
All right, sorry.
But they share everything. Sometimes you're like, oh goodness, everything, huh?
I know.
Little TMI.
All right. Thanks. I mean, okay. Let's unpack. And then I have to learn to unpack what they're really, especially, okay, what does that mean exactly? Because, there's a lot of new things and, especially in Oregon, there's a lot of different experiences than say in, other parts of the country or whatever. And so, but I'm learning every day.
Yeah.
And I'm open-minded to it because that's what they need me to be. And I'm not going to risk alienating them because I can't get over it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's a different version of suck up.
That's a learned skill for us though.
It's 100%.
Yes.
100%.
They force us to rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
I feel like she's probably more of a natural with this.
Yeah.
Where she's always been the empathetic one. What do you call yourself? An empath, right?
Oh, I wouldn't say officially, but I have empathetic tendencies.
Yeah, I have empathetic tendencies, but far much more lagging than her.
Well, it's just more of a matter of fact, right? Like, okay. And I mean, I grew up very much, get over it. Like, what's the problem? Move on.
Right.
Right? That's
right.
Move on.
Yeah.
Like, why are
Well, you
you
can hear me
wallowing in this?
with this one, right? His neck hurts. It's like, dude, come on.
Right.
Just shake it a little bit. You'll be fine.
Right. No, but I think, but then when there's things that aren't dealt with in childhood, we act out our decisions are the result of those things not being dealt with.
Yeah.
And so it really tumbleweeds into the next phase of your life. If it happened in elementary school, it's going to come through junior high, high school, college, marriage, being a parent. Not resolving the root of the problem is going to present itself at some point.
Yeah.
And I think for many Gen Xers, we have ended up resolving things midlife.
Yeah.
Because we've just been powering through, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, we need to resolve what happened. Whatever it was that happened to us.
Yeah.
Because we all have our own experience, even though we have a shared experience. I feel like once we hit kind of our 50, we finally said, okay, we need to deal with this, because and it feels like it sounds crazy to unpack your childhood trauma at 50, but it's really the first chance we've had.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I've said, like, I need to unpack this for me now. I don't need to unpack that. Like, if you go back to childhood with my mom,
right?
My mom and I are fine, and it would only make her feel bad. And she doesn't need to go there, and it's okay. That's fine. That's not what I need. What I need is for me, because I've got another, not 50 years, but another 35, whatever, right?
Maybe 50.
But, and then also for me, like, at some point, maybe there's a person in my life. I just want to make sure that I'm the best version of me and have an authentic or real, connected relationship, or whatever that might look like, in the future. I'm not looking for it tomorrow, but I want to be prepared for it in case it comes, or in case I find, meet somebody. And so, which I'm hopeful at some point to do. I don't think I'm ready for that now. And I haven't dated or anything in 10 years. So I'm
You've been working on yourself.
I've been, working on myself and working on, and focusing on my kids.
Your kids. Yeah.
Which isn't uncommon. Right. But now it's like, I love my 2 cats, but I don't want to be the cat lady.
Right,
so,
right. Well, you said it yourself. 2025 is your year.
Yeah.
It's
time to start focusing on a lot of pieces of who I am and what I've been made up, how I've become who I am.
Yeah.
And
seeing where that leads you.
Yeah. So, and I'm excited for it, though.
Yes.
Like, I'm excited to do that work. I know it's going to be hard, and will be but I'm excited to try. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, and I'm anxious to see what I get through to it, just to settle some of the noise. Some of the stuff that floats around in the back of my brain when I'm sitting there in my house listening to, whatever.
This is a unique thing for our generation, though, right? Because I don't think your mom and my mom, probably your mom, they're not unpacking things.
No.
Unpacking's like, it's a whole new thing, right?
No.
But then the kids behind us, or the people behind us, they've been more coddled, maybe, or taken care of, maybe more closely parented than we were, or something.
You mean the generation like millennials and Gen Z?
Yeah.
I mean, Gen Z definitely, because Gen Z we raised Gen Z. Gen X did, or are raising I should say are. Gen Z, it's a vast age range. So
I'm just curious why we have so many issues. And I get it in terms of we were feral. We weren't watched. Our parents didn't guide us through things, right? There was no talking. But it feels like that's a unique phenomenon for this generational stuff, in a sense.
I feel like, because silent generation and boomers, like, they probably had similar, as far as they were just seen and not heard, powering through. Silent generation, just keep going, don't say anything. Sometimes I wonder if with Gen X, what's unique about us and why we are a pivotal generation is we were also feral and out there and not checked in with, just kind of like boomers, kind of like silent generation. But we also were empathetic and compassionate and thoughtful and loving in an outward way. So, and kind in an outward way. As much as Gen X doesn't want to get involved and control other people and let them live their life, they're always, I feel, the first to be there to help, or if somebody needs something. So we were, I feel like we were very aware of people around us, but we still didn't give a shit what anyone thought. So it's a weird thing. Whereas I think maybe with boomers and silent generation, I don't think there was that connection of what other people might be going through. They were just having their own unique experience. But we kind of had a chip on our shoulder, but at the same time would stop everything to help you. So I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. And what's interesting to me is it is somewhat universal, because I'm from New Jersey, you're from Oregon, she's from Alaska for the most part, your formative years. We all have the same kind of thing. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely.
The shared experience.
Yeah.
From a generational perspective.
No matter what part of the country we're in.
Yeah. We're all kind of have this rough, tough exterior, and we had to be self-sufficient from a very young age, and never really had a chance to process a lot of what the trauma we went through. But that didn't make us selfish.
Yeah.
We aren't a selfish generation. And I don't know if millennials will agree on that, but we really are not a selfish generation. Gen X has been pivotal in society, and so much of it has come from love and kindness, and so but we also don't give a fuck.
Well, what's interesting, like I'm just listening to your story, and it's amazing. And now you've hit this phase where you're like, I'm going to work on myself, and you've got this whole body of knowledge and experience to really do it, right? There's tools now at your disposal.
Exactly.
The experience, the scars, the battle wounds.
At no point did those tools, although there, at no point did I think to look into them earlier, right? Than when the couple times I did therapy, because things happened, right? Not a cumulative of whatever. It was things happened significantly to me, not to just the whole experience. And so it's interesting. It's interesting, the shift. And I also feel that I'm allowed to now, and I didn't feel maybe allowed to before.
Yeah.
Because it would have been selfish to do so.
Is that, do you think, because of your kids' age type of thing, where they were?
I don't know if it was the kids thing. I just think it was, my focus should be elsewhere than on me, right? Although others might disagree with that, but
yeah, you just really nailed it. We're not a self-centered generation.
Yeah.
I think so. You're like what you're talking about. Like, that's not your first thing, is to think of yourself.
No, it's like, get all this done. Then if you need to worry about yourself, you can figure it out, right? Which is where we're at.
And this is where I'm at. What we've seen so far on some of the posts we've put out there, and the feedback we've gotten, the interaction, the women really identify with this. Women your age really identify with that. They're done. They've had enough, or they're reclaiming their energy, or they're ready to focus on themselves.
I mean,
it's a universal thing for your age group.
And that's like, I mean, that can be what I'm doing. That can be like, in a successful marriage, it's the same thing. There's a change in energy, or where the focus needs to be. And so it's important to acknowledge that. And I think that's why, a lot of women have real problems when their kids go to college, right?
Yeah.
Because that's been their focus, even if they're professionals, that's been their focus other than that professional. And so trying to find where they fall is, you get a lot of identity from that. And I certainly did. But it's, what you do best is create humans to put them to the next spot. And then they do successful, and it's like, great, you've done your job well.
Yeah.
But it's being allowed to reflect back on yourself then and say, okay, cool. I've done this, I've done it well, or as well as I could. We're all good. So now I need to find who I am again and what that means. And I don't think I ever found that. A lot of maybe people have that before they get married or in those pivotal 20s, you kind of start to build that. And even if it went off course, you can come back to some of it. And like I said, I didn't feel like I was an authentic human. And I mean, I was a piece of that marriage too, right?
Right.
He had his pieces and they were damaging, but I'm sure there was a piece of me that was, part of that puzzle too. Or, I know there was a piece of me that was part of that puzzle. So, my kids saw that too.
Right.
What does that mean? So.
Right. Well, but I think that, and we've talked about this before, the Gen Z women especially are taking that time in their 20s to figure out who they are, to authentically know themselves. And then if, then they will have that as they go into their relationships. If they choose to go into a relationship or a marriage, or if they choose to have children, they have that sense of who they are. And I think that's amazing.
Well, watching my daughter, she's almost 21, her boundaries that she's created. And I am so proud of her for what she will and will not put up with.
Yeah.
Whether it's relationships or friendships, even. And it's messy because she's 21 and they're all 21 and it's college and whatever. Yeah. But the stuff that is just like, no, like and not just because she hadn't, the dad she had or the mom she had. It was just, I think she'd have that anyway. That's just who she is because she's got the core strength to say, no, I'm worth more. And,
but the healing she's done through therapy and through being able to talk to you authentically, and you've given her the space to unpack, that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
100%.
So you made a really good point about going through the finding the time for yourself and reclaiming your energy and focusing on whatever, unpacking trauma, that it can happen in a healthy marriage too. I think sometimes when people think women are talking about, I'm going to reclaim my energy and I'm going to, have time for myself and I'm going to do this thing and that they're saying they're going to leave their husbands or that they're going, or that means you're going to get divorced, that a divorce and reclaiming your energy are parallel or it's inevitable.
Or that the husband's done something wrong to create this whole thing. It's like, no, this kind of isn't about the husband.
Correct.
Honestly,
in
or
a
the
lot
partner,
of ways.
or the partner.
Or the partner.
Could be somebody else. It's about this, that person and how we have managed all of it. Like, it's not even about necessarily how somebody else is like, oh, well, I'm not going to cook for you every night or what, It's,
it doesn't mean that that the relationship is broken, that there is something wrong in the relationship. Now, it doesn't mean that some things should maybe evolve in the relationship. And I 100% think that the woman in this situation should talk to her partner, her husband, whatever, about what she's going through. And he may need to evolve and change along with her for her needs. Yeah. But just because a woman is reclaiming her energy does not mean that she is getting divorced or that she's leaving her partner.
And I think, just devil's advocate on that too, I think in that case, like in a healthy relationship, right? And they need something different from their partner that they've needed for 20 years.
Right.
Like the right thing is to give the partner a little space to catch up, right? Because like when I was ready to get divorced or when I finally pulled the trigger and it was like, there was a moment, but let's be honest, I'd been planning that for years.
Right.
Like I was already there. By the time it finally happened, that person, I've read this before too, they're like, by the time the person leaves, they're 6 months ahead of the person that you just told them you're leaving.
Right.
And so now that person's trying to catch up on the train, right?
Yeah.
Same thing if you need something different from a relationship and you can't say, okay, some of the things are easy, but like if it's a bigger, like evolving thing, like, you need to give, communicate it and then give some space to like create new habits or whatever that might be. And I don't know you don't have an example.
But I think it's a huge thing. I took that from a couple episodes ago, we evolve slightly slower, I think.
Yeah.
I think we mature slower when we're younger.
Yeah.
And then you guys get to this point. Maybe it's hormonal, maybe it's the kids are leaving, you're shifting, right? You've got not a void, but you have this opening, this opportunity, because the kids have left, and that's been probably your primary focus. Now you start thinking. You start thinking about this next phase. Meanwhile, as men, we're just doing the same thing. So that you do need some time to catch up and communicate and listen, and it's not the easiest thing.
Well, no, and also sometimes women will let things go, things they've been asking for from their partner, because and we've talked about this in past episodes, because of what's going on in life, raising kids and stuff. So she has communicated it to her partner.
Yeah.
And she's at the point now where it's like, you have to listen.
But so many times you've been communicating it for so many years. It's what's different now, but something is different because you guys have hit that point. To your point, I knew X amount of time ago I wanted a divorce, and I was there. Now I just had to line up the ducks in a sense.
Yeah.
But you say it for years and years and years, right? And then finally you really mean it. It's like, whoa, the game just changed. I'm still over here.
Yeah.
Okay, but how now, from a male perspective, how do you justify not listening for all those years to that request?
I'm going to plead the fifth on this one.
See, that's a whole nother thing. It's like, yes, you just exposed yourself. Women maybe have been saying it for years and years and years. And it's not the woman's responsibility that you need time to catch up on that.
No, I do go back to the, you get put into these roles, and oftentimes the man's role kind of keeps going along the same path. And because you're so focused on kids and raising those kids, if you have kids, that you now have this opportunity, you have this extra time, you can do other things, and you start to do those things, and you get thoughts in your head, and you start to act on them, and it's just changes. It's changing for you at a different pace, I think, than it is changing for guys.
Okay, so the flip of that would be like, you hear about, midlife crises, which for a long time were men's midlife crises, right?
Yeah.
And or when they retire, and like men don't know what to do with themselves, right? Because historical gender roles, right? They're in an office job or whatever, and then it's like now they're, so it's something similar. It's just that now we're also doing it. I don't think women as often or as vocally or as identified were doing it 20 years ago. They were.
Right.
And now we're just talking about it because we, as the Gen X, I've asked my mom about menopause, and she says, well, I didn't really have that.
Right.
And BS, she didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure she didn't. I didn't live at home with her, so I didn't see any of it or experience it, but
they didn't talk about it. But but Gen X is also changing the narrative on that. Absolutely.
I mean, all of this is like it's evolving for men and women, differently for our generation than it did previously. I'm sure your dad, when I'm assuming he retired.
Yep.
And, that would have been transition for your mom to have him home all the time. And, all of those kind of things. It's just, but they wouldn't have had the community.
I think you hit it, though. I think you hit it. Our parents didn't really do it. Your mom really probably didn't do a huge shift. My mom really didn't either, but you guys are. And it's a generational thing. And you're changing the game, I think, for men. Because if I look out, I never expect my mom claiming her space and unpackaging shit. That's not even a reality.
Unpackaging.
Right? Unpackaging, whatever it is. That's just not a reality. So the game has changed.
Yeah.
And we'll catch up. Yeah. But I don't think that we're quite there.
Well, you guys haven't identified it yet. Are you guys having?
That's what it is.
Yeah. catching up is you're probably about 5 years behind.
and that's on Gen X women, because we are an incredibly loving group, but we also don't take shit. And so what you're dealing with is that all of our love for all these years was given to our families, our children and our husbands, partners. But now we're in the I'm not going to take shit phase. And I think a lot of that is like, because I know so many Gen X women and they're all badasses in love and in sticking up for themselves. Like now, but they gave over of themselves in those years just as passionately as they're passionately trying to reclaim their energy now.
Yeah. So I think what you touched on earlier, we were talking about like the Gen Z women, is that they're doing it first.
Yes.
Instead of ending with it or getting middle, right? They're like, heck, no, I'm going to start here and then figure out the rest of it on top of that, right? Whatever that means. Like, I mean, the idea that my kids have a marriage and not because of how bad it was, but just in general, like how I was or like my parents was, there's absolutely no reason.
No. I mean, and I think that they will go through their lives, speaking at least to Gen Z women, authentically knowing themselves and honoring themselves through all their phases. Hopefully. I mean, as a mother, it's always hard. You always, but I still think they're going to approach motherhood differently.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see that actually.
Yeah.
And I would even say with my son, who's 26, watching him and what he's done, the work he's done after a relationship and what he needed to do for that to like make sure he has the appropriate boundaries now for future. Whereas if he hadn't done that, quite honestly, he might still be in a not healthy relationship because it was mirroring some things, not from an abusive standpoint, but just mirroring some like, okay, well, I'm just going to settle for this. This is what I get. This is my lot, whatever. I don't think that's the case anymore. I feel like he's transitioning, he and I have talked, on some things coming up, going forward. It's like, okay, all right. oh, thank God. But,
right.
it's,
it's so encouraging.
It is.
And I do think, I don't think millennials get enough credit. I think millennials started this. I think that in general, millennials started the shift. I really do.
No doubt.
Yeah. Their marriages.
Yeah.
You said yourself.
Oh my God.
You have millennials, you work with them.
Yeah.
And listening to them, they're just kind of a natural partners.
Yeah. It's like the expectation that just because a kid's sick, that means that the mom has to be off or whatever. That's not the expectation. We have a more flexible workforce now, which also helps. I think some of this.
Yeah.
But the expectations of like, I think about my boss, who again was a great supporter, still is. He was much more, and he's not that much older than me, but he was much more of like, well, if your butt's pre-COVID, butt's in the chair, 7 to 7, that means you did a good work day.
Right.
If you leave at 3:30 to go to an appointment, it's like, how's your half day?
Yeah.
He used to joke like that, and just to make me insane. He's come around now.
Yeah.
Through and so it's like that flexibility from a workforce, men are getting it too, not just women. And the expectation is that the men, I told my boss one time, I'm like, yeah, it'd be nice if I had a wife.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's
such
like,
a good point.
Who do I have to take a kid to an appointment? I don't have a wife because his wife stayed home.
Yeah.
Which great. They could structure it. I don't, and I'm not going that way, but it's like, I don't have that. So that's me.
Right.
And, and he was fine, but it's just,
But with the millennials,
funny.
I think that shared responsibility, it's starting with them.
Yeah.
I think they definitely have cracked the shell. And then I think Gen X raising Gen Z the way we have, they're just going to run with it.
But what's interesting is when you manage people and you manage different people or different generations of people, you get to guys, say like me, a Gen X, you get into these career development kind of conversations, and we're not as, say, dynamic as a millennial who really does have a plan.
Yeah.
And they want to map it and they want to go towards it and they want you to participate in it. And it is actually cool because, again, it's holding you, they hold you more accountable. Yes. And I think it's somewhat interchangeable to say accountability and authenticity are very similar, in
sometimes I get annoyed that I have to be like, that they push me like that. Cause like, they like, I've managed some people that are Gen X, and it was just like, okay, it was more, I wasn't really managing them. It was like, okay, they just kind of worked and, told them what to do. And then these other like, okay, well, and here's my plan. And this and that. And I'm just like, oh God,
the millennials.
I have to participate in this. Okay. I'm going to think about that. But it's pushed me to be a better, this is pivoted into employee stuff, but it's pushed me to become like, oh, that's what it is to be a leader, not just a boss or a
100%,
supervisor or something. And I welcomed it. Like eventually, once I got over myself and went, okay, and then got some tools around it.
But
right?
I think that's touching into what's allowed you to be a stronger person. Because
Yeah.
it's not just a better manager.
Yeah.
You become a better person.
Yeah.
By
That's a good
default.
point. That's actually a really good point. I mean, honestly, this company I work for, I they're great. And honestly, it's been the salve or whatever, over a lot of things, because it's allowed me to do this last 10 years. I mean, I've been there 10 years to get through this and have such a stable, not just a stable employment, but just also then grow in the company, which has given me another, I spent a lot of time overly focused on work because it gave me a lot of validation that way, and I wasn't getting it elsewhere. And so I've learned to balance that. And that's another thing that I think Gen X is trying to figure out, that balance now later in life, right? Because we didn't have that tool, because the expectations when we were all working for boomers.
Yeah.
Kind of like I was talking about.
The millennials have helped us.
But do you, those initial millennials would be like, oh God, they want an Xbox in the break room. And it's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're not at a, there's some really funny, okay, I'm not on TikTok, but there's some really funny reels that I watch on Instagram that are probably TikTok, where it's like different generations responding to business things.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Boomer down.
You know what's interesting? The millennials, they want a better work-life balance.
Yeah.
And as a Gen Xer, I'm like, well, what the hell is that? I still have the raspberry, well, not the raspberry, what the hell is that? The BlackBerry buzz.
Yeah.
I had a BlackBerry in my hip for years.
Yeah.
I still get like a buzz. And guys my age can relate to that.
Yeah.
But the millennials, they wanted more balance, work-life balance. And it gets you thinking, well, why shouldn't we have more work-life balance?
Right.
No, I think
it's a good thing.
They changed the landscape of companies. And then as a result, they definitely did.
Yeah.
And then as a result, it's automatically what Gen Z kind of is looking for as they're looking for work. And then when they don't find it, they're like, what? No, I want, this isn't what I'm looking for. So I think millennials have definitely created that work-life balance expectation for the Gen Zs, 100%. So
yeah, which they got a wrath of crap for a long time.
Yeah,
I actually, and I will probably, apologies to them all, because at some point I probably said that 10 years ago or something was part of that. But you're right. I think they really started it, and it's forced us to kind of look back and be like, okay, what the hell am I working so hard for?
Yeah.
I want to work hard. I want to be a good employee. I want to do all the things, but the truth is, if I'm not there tomorrow, somebody's going to miss me.
Yeah.
But they're going to keep going.
You know what I found is that since COVID, and the best thing about it is I work from home now.
Yeah.
And instead of that being in your chair from 7 to 7, I check email every day at 6:37 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then I'm away for a little while, and then I come back, and then I'll work throughout the weekend, but it's not really working. It's just checking in and keeping tabs on things.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. I feel like I have more of a balance.
It's more balanced
in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, 100%. That's I'm on vacation, and I was doing work emails before I came in here, and I took a call. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm just checking in. If I did this, then I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Makes going back easier.
And it's not like I'm sitting around waiting for anything, and I'm not sitting at the island, whatever.
Yeah.
But,
well, shout out to the millennials for helping Gen X find some work-life balance.
Right.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it for sure.
Listen, Kendall, we can't thank you enough for sharing your story with us.
Yes.
Being so vulnerable with us and with our listeners. I know there's going to be some people that can relate to a lot of what you talked about and probably feel very seen from some of it. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
I know I'm not the only one. You certainly feel like that in the moment, but this has been cool. and just, happy to have been here, happy to be a part of it. So
we're absolutely thrilled because we do have quite a journey we've had with Kendall. We've known her since we were teenagers, which is crazy.
You're going to ask her 5-year plan?
No, because I think 2025 is this is her year, and that's her plan. And I just feel like that's your immediate plan.
Yeah.
And I know Kendall's going to come and see us again. So we're going to reflect on how did that go?
Yes.
Check
in.
I'm really happy for you. I think you're doing awesome.
Thank you.
I think the self-awareness or revelation, the authenticity, the whole thing, it's awesome. Yeah. Congratulations to you.
Good timing. I mean, it's like, I'm not a victim.
No.
I'm just going to move on. And that's the thing. That's unfortunately, depending on who might see it, there's other people out there who might think I'm playing a victim. It's like, no, I'm not.
You're so not.
This was my experience. And all of this is now going to take me to the next experience. So,
100%. This is, in a way, I'm not saying this is closure, but I think this is a great foundation to bounce off of as you tackle your year of you, because your truth deserves to be said.
Yeah.
And no, you're not a victim. You're a queen. You're a warrior. And you're an inspiration probably to a lot of people that are going to hear this. And may even motivate some women to take some steps to get themselves out of a situation. Yeah. So just sharing your story for that alone is courageous and something to is very inspiring. So
I've been happy to be here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We love having you. So next time you visit, we will have Kendall on again and see how where she's at in her life. Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Oh, absolutely. And again, thank you to everyone for listening. We welcome all comments, questions, and we will see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.